Chapter 10-12. After all, the knife that was inserted in the balance point was not a perfect fit. It was only a 90% fit with the balance point. If Charlotte had more time, he could have found or made a perfect fit, but Akiko Tsukino's situation was getting worse, so he didn't have more time. "Boss, let me go. You can escape by yourself," Akiko Tsukino said. "Don't talk nonsense. Stay here." Charlotte crawled forward with his hands and feet. He wore the special climbing gloves that Akiko Tsukino gave him. They were good for his crawling, but the hard limestone had cut his pants. His knees were already bruised and bloody. But he couldn't care so much. He only had one thought, and that was to carry Akiko Tsukino and escape before the pyramid collapsed. Crack, crack, crack. There was another sound behind him, and the whole mountain was shaking. From time to time, a piece of rock or a cloud of dust fell from the download channel. It gave people the feeling that this place would collapse at any time and bury everything. "Let me go, let me go." Akiko Tsukino was eager to die, and she began to struggle. She thought that she had become Charlotte's burden, and she was eager to die. Xiaolei suddenly waved his hand and hugged her buttocks. He wore climbing gloves with spikes on his hands, and as he grabbed her, the spikes on the gloves suddenly pierced into Akiko Tsukino's butt. Ugh! Akiko Tsukino let out a muffled groan and sucked in a breath of cold air in pain. It was this prick that made her a little more clear-headed. Charlotte crawled and shouted, "I won't leave you alone. Either we leave here together or we die here together. Choose one." Akiko Tsukino hugged Charlotte's neck tightly, and her legs clamped on his waist even harder. She didn't speak, but this was her response. The sound behind him grew louder and louder, and the mountain trembled more and more violently. However, it did not collapse all at once. After all, the military knife that was embedded in the point of balance had a 90% compatibility rate, and it was still playing its role in maintaining balance. It was also because of this that Charlotte finally crawled to the exit. At the entrance of the cave, Charlotte untied his belt and bound Akiko Tsukino to his body. Then, he climbed down the rock wall. The tremors inside the mountain were very strong, but the tremors outside the mountain were not as strong. With the help of the spiked teeth climbing gloves, he climbed down very quickly. As the distance between him and the ground became shorter and shorter, the tremors outside the mountain became more and more intense. It felt like a magnitude 8 earthquake. Rumble! The sound of explosives exploding suddenly came from the inside of the mountain, and the entire mountain top collapsed. Charlotte's feet pushed against the rock wall, and his whole body immediately separated from the rock wall, and then fell to the ground. Rumble! The entire mountain suddenly became half shorter. The rock that Charlotte had grabbed just now sank directly into the ground. If he had been a second slower, he and Akiko Tsukino would have been crushed into meat patties by the rocks and then buried. Bang! The two of them fell to the ground. Charlotte was below, and Akiko Tsukino was above. Originally, Akiko Tsukino was below, but before they landed, Charlotte twisted his body and switched positions. Pfft! Under the violent impact and tremors, Charlotte opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Akiko Tsukino rolled down from Charlotte's body, but this time she was not injured. Charlotte used his body as a life-saving cushion for her. "Boss, are you okay?" Akiko Tsukino asked anxiously. She grabbed Charlotte's hand and wanted to help him up, but she lacked the strength. "No need, I'm fine." Charlotte spat out another mouthful of blood. However, this was not because the injury had worsened, but because the pressure on his internal organs had been reduced. After spitting out this mouthful of blood, he felt much better. After all, his body had a near-perfect immune system, and his ability to self-regulate was far superior to ordinary people. The same injury, other people would need a few days or even half a month to recover, but he only needed a little time. Although Charlotte felt much better, the appearance of him spitting out 2 mouthfuls of blood still scared Akiko Tsukino. she asked nervously. "Are you really okay? Tell me, what can I do for you?" Charlotte got up from the ground. "I'm really okay, don't worry about me." He looked around and his face suddenly changed. "We've already come out, but why don't we see Sayamu?" Akiko Tsukino also looked around, and there was no one around. She also did not see Sayamu. This was not normal. Charlotte's heart suddenly raised a trace of vigilance, and his eyes moved in the direction of the valley entrance. This valley entrance was quiet, and it looked particularly desolate without any vegetation. Yelena should be at the valley entrance, but he did not see her at all. Charlotte then moved his eyes to the top of the hill that was half shorter, but he did not see Angumi-kan. Angumi-kan should be guarding the top of the hill with the pyramid, and with such a strong earthquake just now, he must have left. However, he looked at the hills on the left and right respectively, but unfortunately, he did not see Angumi-kan. Yelena, Sayamu, and Angumi-kan, who were supposed to be waiting outside, were all gone. What was going on? Charlotte frowned. What happened outside when he and Akiko Tsukino were in the pyramid? Akiko Tsukino took out the satellite phone, but before she could make a call, there was suddenly the roar of an engine and the sound of a propeller tearing through the air from the direction of the valley entrance. A Black Hawk helicopter suddenly appeared in the sky. Just as the helicopter's propeller appeared, Charlotte had already picked up Akiko Tsukino and ran toward a pile of rubble. The pile of rubble had just been piled up. The rock wall that was hundreds of meters high had collapsed, and the falling stones could have been used to build a Versailles palace. It had become a hiding place for him and Akiko Tsukino. Charlotte had just stuffed Akiko Tsukino into a gap between the rocks when the helicopter appeared in the sky above the valley entrance. He then squeezed into the primitive gap. The Black Hawk helicopter quickly flew over and circled around the collapsed mountain. In the rubble, Charlotte looked at the Black Hawk helicopter hovering in the sky from the gap between the rocks. Although it was hundreds of meters high, such a distance was actually no different from a few meters to his left eye. He saw the pilot in the cockpit, who was wearing the uniform of the Israeli army, and several professional soldiers in the rear cabin, who were also wearing the uniform of the Israeli army. Otherwise, he could tell that these Israeli soldiers were from the Israeli Army and Air Force. But the problem was, why would the Israeli soldiers appear here? Could the disappearance of Sayamu, Angumi-kan, and Yelena be related to these Israeli soldiers? Akiko Tsukino made a phone call from the gap between the rocks, but whether it was Sayamu, Yelena, or Angumi-kan, he couldn't get through. "I can't contact them. What happened?" Akiko Tsukino's heart was filled with worry. Charlotte said, "I don't know you. How are you? Can you still hold on?" "There shouldn't be a problem, but—" Akiko Tsukino wanted to say something but stopped. "But what?" "I should be the one protecting you, but now you're the one protecting me. I've become your burden." Akiko Tsukino said, "Don't say that, we're all family. I treat you like my little sister, and protecting you is my responsibility as an older brother." Charlotte said, "Are you men all so fickle?" Akiko Tsukino suddenly said. Charlotte was stunned. You promised that you would fulfill my wish," Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte, the Black Hawk circled twice in the sky and didn't leave after completing its aerial reconnaissance. Instead, it landed. It landed on a piece of flat land about 100 meters away from where Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino were hiding. Other than the helicopter pilot, 6 fully armed Israeli soldiers jumped out of the helicopter and headed in their direction. Charlotte pulled out his Viper pistol. His Gale assault rifle had fallen in the mountain passage. Akiko Tsukino still had a Gale assault rifle in her equipment bag, but the space was narrow. It was difficult for her to take it out from her equipment bag and assemble it. The 6 Israeli soldiers quickly approached. Charlotte suddenly became nervous. He and Akiko Tsukino were hiding in the narrow gap between the rocks. If they were discovered, they would either be killed or captured. There was no third outcome. because the opponent wasn't just the 6 soldiers on the ground. There was also an armed helicopter behind them. It carried heavy machine guns and cannons. If a battle broke out, the Viper pistol in his hand wouldn't be able to do anything to the big guy, but the opponent could take his and Akiko Tsukino's lives in a single wave of attack. In such a situation, even he couldn't help but be nervous and even afraid. The 6 Israeli soldiers continued to walk over, conversing in Hebrew as they walked. Xiaolei had locked onto their lips in advance and read their conversation with the lip-reading spell. "What's happening here? It seems like an earthquake." "Earthquake? Go to hell, it's an earthquake in real life." "But I don't think so, because everything else is normal." "How can there be an earthquake only on a mountain?" "If it's not an earthquake, then what happened?" "God knows." 3 unidentified armed men escaped to Gaza. The people from Mossad are chasing them. I think what happened here must have something to do with them. You mean there's a terrorist attack here? Who would attack an uninhabited mountain? There's no such possibility. Reading this, Charlotte was anxious. The Mossad was a world-famous secret service, as famous as the Soviet Union's Krupp. The people from Mossad were chasing Syamu and Gyumi Khan and Yelena. How could he not be worried? Stop making meaningless guesses. Check this place and go back to report. One of the leaders ended the conversation. He then ordered his men to split into 2 groups. One group searched to the left, and the other searched to the right along the rocks. Chapter 10:13. The leader brought 2 heavily armed Israeli soldiers over to the pile of rubble. The 3 of them looked relaxed, but Charlotte was so nervous that he held his breath. Akiko Tsukino reached out and pulled Charlotte. Charlotte turned around to look at her, but at this moment, Akiko Tsukino suddenly squeezed in from behind him, and in an instant she was in front of him. Chest to chest, legs to legs, there was not even a millimeter of space between the 2. "What are you doing?" Charlotte's voice was very soft, but it carried a stern tone of self-questioning. "If they find us, you must shoot them," Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte was stunned. He understood what Akiko Tsukino meant. She wanted to use her body as a cover for him, in exchange for time and opportunity to kill the enemy. In his heart, he was still blaming Akiko Tsukino for her rash behavior, but after understanding her intentions, his heart was touched. Akiko Tsukino's mouth revealed a trace of a smile, and she slowly squeezed in front of Charlotte. The pair of plump breasts in front of her changed shape due to the recoil from Xiaolei's chest, but she didn't mind at all. Perhaps this was the reason why she smiled. She squeezed in and stood in front of Charlotte. In her hand was a Viper pistol, and she was ready to fight. The 3 Israeli soldiers stopped at the edge of the pile of rubble. "It's really scary, half of the mountain is gone," an Israeli soldier said. "If anyone was at the foot of the mountain, I'm afraid they would have become meat patties by now," another Israeli soldier said. The leading officer carefully observed the pile of rubble, and he frowned. Colonel Cantor dug the road into the valley a week ago, and today the mountain collapsed. Could there be some secret behind this? Secret? Perhaps only Mossad's intelligence officer, Kearns, would know. He was the one who requested Colonel Canty to seal off this valley, and the suggestion to cut off the road was probably from him as well. Those guys from Mossad are very secretive. No one knows what they are up to, an Israeli soldier said. The mountain collapsed, so the interior must be empty. Maybe this mountain is a secret military base, a base to research secret chemical weapons, another Israeli soldier said. All right, let's not talk about it anymore. After all, it's about Mossad. Be careful not to get into trouble. Let's go to the right and take a look. If there's no problem, we'll leave. The leading officer ended the conversation. The other 2 Israeli soldiers followed the officer away from the rubble and continued to search to the right. When they were far away, Charlotte let out a long sigh of relief. His palms and back were covered in cold sweat, and his feet were trembling slightly because of his nervousness. At this moment, Akiko Tsukino suddenly fell backwards. Charlotte hurriedly reached out to support her and said anxiously, "Akiko, what's wrong?" Akiko Tsukino closed her eyes and did not react at all. It was a miracle that she was able to hold on until now. Just now, she and Charlotte had both relaxed from the extreme state of extreme tension. Charlotte's legs were only trembling, but she had fainted directly. Charlotte held her tightly in his arms. He had already lost Amanda and Pu Taiyong, and that feeling was very painful. He did not want to go through it again. 10 minutes later, the Black Hawk took off and flew in the direction of Jerusalem. Charlotte dragged Akiko Tsukino out from the gap in the rocks and carried her on his back. He was faced with two choices. One was to go to Gaza and the other was to go to Jerusalem. From a safety point of view, going to Gaza was the safest for him, and he might also be able to find Sayamu, Yelena, and Angumi Khan. But from Akiko Tsukino's point of view, she needed doctors and medicine, so she could only go to Jerusalem. Charlotte carried Akiko Tsukino in the direction of the entrance of the valley. In that direction, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was bathed in sunlight and looked very holy. Although he was carrying a person, Charlotte was not slow. He jogged all the way with Akiko Tsukino on his back, and only slowed down when he was really tired. He would walk for a distance, and when his strength recovered, he would jog again. As he moved, he kept his vision in a state of telescopic vision, observing the situation within a radius of more than 4,000 meters. He was not very worried about being discovered by the Israelis while he was moving, because his left eye could see further and clearer than ordinary binoculars. Walking out of the entrance of the valley, Charlotte left the road and chose the roadless wasteland. The Jeep Wrangler had already been driven away, but he did not know whether it was Sayamu and the others or the Israelis who had driven it away. Charlotte was very worried about Angumi Khan, Yelena, and Sayamu, but he could not care about the three of them now, because Akiko Tsukino needed his care more. Half an hour later, an Israeli settlement appeared in the wasteland. It was an agricultural cooperative, with inhabited houses and cultivated farmland on the wasteland. At a glance, Charlotte saw tomatoes, strawberries, and sweet peppers planted in the fields, and some Israeli farmers working in the fields. It was a scene filled with a sense of peace. Israel's agriculture was the most developed in the world, and the farmers' income was also the highest in the world. There were schools and hospitals in a settlement, which was equivalent to a small town. Akiko Tsukino's condition is getting worse. If I take her to Jerusalem, she might not last until then. Moreover, there are many Mossad spies in Jerusalem, and there are also people from the CIA. Going there will bring unknown risk. Why don't I go to this settlement first? Even if I can't solve the problem, getting a car would be good. Charlotte made up his mind. He ran toward the settlement with Akiko Tsukino. When he was about 500 meters away from the settlement, he put Akiko Tsukino down and dug a hole to bury all the weapons, ammunition, and spy equipment in their bags. He remembered the location, then carried Akiko Tsukino and walked toward the settlement. A few children were playing games on the road in the settlement. Some were playing as Israeli soldiers and some were playing as Hamas. The children were playing and it was a lively scene. A Jewish woman wearing an apron came out of a door and yelled at her children to go home for dinner. She saw Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino on Charlotte's back. She was stunned for a moment, then walked over. Charlotte greeted her first. He said in Hebrew, "Dear lady, my girlfriend needs a doctor. Can you help me?" "Oh, you know Hebrew and you speak it so fluently. What happened to your girlfriend?" The Jewish woman came over. Charlotte said, "She seems to have been bitten by a snake or a scorpion. I sucked the poisonous blood out of the wound, but I still couldn't help her. Please help me." "Where are you from?" the Jewish woman asked. Charlotte said, "We are from China. We are here to travel. We are from Shanghai, China. My grandfather helped you Jews. We are here with my grandfather's last wish to find the relatives of the Jews he helped. I have a relic to give to the relatives of the Jews. What is it? 50,000 US dollars, Charlotte said. You are a good man. Come with me. The Jewish woman led the way. Charlotte followed her and asked, Dear lady, are you taking me to the hospital? There is no hospital here, only a clinic. But my husband is a doctor, and the clinic is at my house. He should be able to help you, the Jewish woman said. Charlotte secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He had no choice but to lie to a kind Jewish woman. During World War II, the Jews were slaughtered by the German Nazis and fled all over the world. Some of them fled to Shanghai, China. The Chinese took them in and took care of them. The Jews were a grateful people, and they helped China a lot after the war. The Chinese who came to Israel to travel would also receive a certain degree of preferential treatment. He told such a lie, and naturally won the sympathy of the Jewish woman. It even awakened the Jewish people's deep gratitude. Yes, coming from China to give 50,000 US dollars, how could they not help such a good person? Charlotte followed the Jewish woman into her home. There was indeed a clinic in her home. There were many medicines in the medicine cabinet, as well as some blood testing equipment. Charlotte put Akiko Tsukino on the hospital bed. Wait a moment, I'll call my husband. He's working in the fields. The Jewish woman left. Charlotte did not have time to wait. He pricked Akiko Tsukino's finger with a blood sample needle, and then used the blood analysis equipment to test the composition of her blood. Although he was not a doctor, his ability to treat patients and save people was much better than most doctors. The results of the blood sample test came out quickly. Akiko Tsukino's blood contained toxins that could decompose potassium, as well as components that could destroy the molecular structure of acetylcholine. As a result, it damaged the brain's neurons, causing an injury similar to Alzheimer's disease, which was commonly known as Alzheimer's disease. If the potassium in the body disappeared, the body would lack electrolyte. How could the heart still beat? The destruction of the molecular structure of acetylcholine would cause dementia in the brain, further increasing the damage. If it had not been for a long time, and most of the efficacy of such toxins had been lost in the weathering, Akiko Tsukino would have died at that time. After finding the nature of the toxins, Charlotte then began the corresponding treatment. He found the potassium chloride injection from the medicine cabinet and directly pushed Akiko Tsukino's vein. Then he gave Akiko Tsukino some drugs to alleviate the components that destroyed the molecular structure of acetylcholine. Whether it was the potassium chloride injection or the oral drugs for nerve treatment, they were actually very common drugs because irregular heartbeat and Alzheimer's disease were very common diseases. This was a clinic, so of course, these commonly used drugs would be prepared. After that, the Jewish woman came in with a man. Is she the patient? The man came in and went straight to Akiko Tsukino, looking very professional. Charlotte said, Yes, but what? The man opened Akiko Tsukino's eyelids, checked her pupils, and grabbed Akiko Tsukino's wrist to check her pulse. Charlotte said, I'm actually also a doctor. I was worried that her condition would deteriorate, so I've used your equipment and drugs to treat her. Now she should be fine. The man looked at Charlotte in surprise. Are you also a doctor? Charlotte nodded. Yes, I'm a doctor from China. I work in a hospital in Shanghai. My name is Zhou Qiang. Nice to meet you. You're welcome. I like your China's culture. My name is Heimer, and this is my wife, Mina. The man who claimed to be Heimer shook hands with Charlotte, and then his wife, Mina, also shook hands with Charlotte. Charlotte exchanged a few words with the couple. Akiko Tsukino, who was lying on the bed, suddenly woke up. She opened her eyes and saw Heimer and Mina. She instinctively raised her hand. It was definitely not a greeting, but an offensive movement. Charlotte quickly grabbed her hand and pressed his upper body on her arm. He said excitedly, Honey, you're awake. This is great. God bless you, you're awake, Akiko Tsukino, ? Charlotte then said, Honey, I thought I would never see you again. Fortunately, we met a good person. Mr. Heimer's medicine saved you. Thank him. Akiko Tsukino already understood what was going on. She opened her mouth and said softly, Thank you. Charlotte said, I forgot. My girlfriend doesn't understand Hebrew. Akiko Tsukino smiled. Chapter 10:14. As night fell, the city of Jerusalem in the distance was ablaze with lights. The ancient and modern elements were combined in that city, as well as its strong religious atmosphere, which made it different from all the other cities in the world. The atmosphere in the settlement was quiet and peaceful. Heimer's wife, Mina, made dinner. It was typical Israeli traditional food: kams, pizza, sardines, and red wine. Akiko Tsukino was still very weak and couldn't get up to eat. After Charlotte, Heimer, and Mina had dinner, he brought a plate of Israeli food to a room. This room was the guest room that Mina had prepared for him and Akiko Tsukino, the couple. When Charlotte opened the door, Akiko Tsukino's hand retracted into the quilt. She hid a fruit knife in her hand. Charlotte said, Don't be nervous. When Akiko Tsukino saw that it was Charlotte, she took her hand out of the quilt and put the hidden fruit knife on the bedside table. Charlotte walked over. Eat something. Your body is still very weak. Eat something and have a good sleep. Then you'll be fine. We'll leave here early tomorrow morning. Help me deal with my wound. I feel that it's inflamed and might be festering, Akiko Tsukino said. She frowned and looked like she was in pain. Charlotte felt a headache, but he still braced himself and said, Eat something first. I'll go to Dr. Heimer's medicine cabinet to get some medicine and gauze. Well, okay. Akiko Tsukino took the plate from Charlotte's hands. Heimer and Mina had already returned to their room. Charlotte didn't say goodbye to them and went directly to Heimer's room for treatment. He found some amoxicillin capsules, an aspirin, hydrogen peroxide, gauze, and tape from Heimer's medicine cabinet. When he returned to his and Akiko Tsukino's room, Akiko Tsukino had already eaten some sardines, as well as some pocket pancakes and pizza. She only ate a little and put the plate of food on the bedside table. Why don't you eat more? Charlotte walked towards her. I don't want to eat any more. I don't have a good appetite, Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte sat down by the bed and gave Akiko Tsukino a glass of water, as well as a few amoxicillin capsules and an aspirin tablet that he had prepared for her. Take your medicine. Akiko Tsukino took the medicine and turned over. Charlotte hadn't done anything yet, but her face already had a shy blush. She was quietly waiting for something, but she didn't dare to look at Charlotte's eyes. I have to treat the wound in that place again, sigh. Charlotte sighed in his heart. Then he braced himself and grabbed her elastic pants, carefully pulling it down. The elastic pants stopped at her thighs, and the big white ball wrapped in the key fabric was exposed under the light. It was full and perky, extremely sexy. Her closed legs were white and delicate, and there was no gap between them. However, there was also a little mysterious and mature scenery revealed. It was like a hill shrouded in the morning mist, hazy, and the details couldn't be seen clearly, but its outline was very clear. She didn't lie. Her wound was really bad. The blood that flowed from the wound had wet part of the key fabric and formed a blood scar. The bit of fabric that covered the wound was wet, and white pus had seeped out, but not much. Charlotte tried to pull it out, but the piece of fabric was stuck to her wound, and he couldn't pull it out at all. As soon as he pulled it out, Akiko Tsukino frowned. It hurts, Are you afraid of pain? Charlotte thought it was strange. For a woman like Akiko Tsukino, even if she was shot or stabbed, she wouldn't cry out because of the pain, let alone such a minor injury. But now she was crying out in pain with just a little treatment. She was acting like a delicate girl. Of course I'm afraid. I'm a woman. Akiko Tsukino said, and then added, I'm a woman. There seemed to be a subtle hint in this sentence. I have to cut it off. Is that okay? Charlotte asked. Akiko Tsukino nodded. No problem. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to ask for my opinion. Xiaolei picked up the scissors and carefully cut open the elasticity. Then, he followed the opening down and cut it with a kacha-kacha sound. It was so white that it was almost exposed. It really felt like the kind of white flour that was used to make steamed buns, and it was the kind that had yeast powder added. However, there was also a dirty part. It was the triangular wound, and the blood and pus made that part very bad. Charlotte looked away, then grabbed the piece of fabric that he had cut off and carefully pulled it out. He didn't dare to look at the process because it would make him feel like the male lead in a movie. When it was completely out of her body, he threw it on the ground. However, he still had to shift his gaze over and watch helplessly. If he didn't do that, how was he going to treat her wound? Sometimes people couldn't avoid this kind of thing. Don't avoid treatment when you're sick. I'm a doctor. Charlotte thought so in his heart. Then, he picked up the hydrogen peroxide spray and sprayed it on her wound. Hiss! Tsukino Enko sucked in a breath of cold air. Just bear with it a little longer. Charlotte comforted her, and while treating the wound, he diverted her attention. By the way, what do you think? How are they now? Akiko Tsukino said, I don't know. I hope they're okay. They must have encountered some trouble and had to leave. When they get rid of the trouble, they will definitely come back to us. Charlotte also thought so. If Sayamu, Yelena, and Angumi-kan hadn't encountered big trouble, they wouldn't have left at that time. For some reason, the man with the king cobra tattoo on his arm appeared in his mind again. If that man was still alive, where would he be now? A few minutes later, Charlotte finished treating Akiko Tsukino's wound. There was a gauze scar on her big white ball. He pulled up her trousers. Well, there should be no problem. When we leave, we'll bring some amoxicillin capsules. They can help reduce your inflammation. Where are you going? Akiko Tsukino suddenly got up and grabbed Charlotte's hand. Charlotte was slightly stiff. I'm going to sleep on the sofa in the living room. Now that we haven't left the danger zone, someone has to stand guard. Akiko Tsukino used a little strength to pull Charlotte to the bed. But even when she was healthy, her strength was not as great as Charlotte's, let alone in this weak state. She straightened Charlotte's arm, but Charlotte's feet didn't move at all. Charlotte coughed awkwardly. Go to sleep. You need a good rest. Akiko Tsukino hesitated for a moment. She let go of Charlotte's hand and said, You promised me. Charlotte smiled bitterly. Let's talk about it when you're better. You're not fit to fulfill that kind of wish in your current state. Akiko Tsukino's face blushed again. She didn't say anything and just nodded gently. Charlotte left her room and let out a long sigh of relief. Sorry, when did I promise to fulfill her wish? I don't think I did, right? It wasn't a big deal to play irresponsibly. Many men love to do that kind of thing. But he wasn't that kind of man. Not to mention that he was now the husband of 4 women and the father of 4 children. He had to control his lower body. Although he had promised to fulfill her wish with a shake of his head, the situation at that time was very complicated. He planned to solve this problem by stalling. Heimer and Mina were already asleep, and the lights in the couple's room were not turned on. Charlotte sat in the living room for a while, then left Heimer's house. He took the path out of the settlement and ran to the place where the weapons and ammunition were buried. Early the next morning, he would leave with Akiko Tsukino. He wanted to bring back not only the weapons and ammunition, but also the crystal skull. The situation during the day was very special. His plan was to bring Akiko Tsukino to the hospital in Jerusalem for treatment. He didn't dare to bring the weapons, ammunition, and the crystal skull with him at all. He quickly found the place where the things were buried. He threw away the soil and took out the 2 equipment bags inside. Akiko Tsukino's equipment bag contained the weapons and ammunition, and his equipment bag contained the crystal skull. He opened it and checked. The weapons and ammunition were all there, and the crystal skull was still in his equipment bag. He looked around. Within a radius of more than 4,000 meters, there was no one except for the lights in the settlement. After confirming this, he took out the crystal skull from his backpack, held it in his hand, and stared at it. Under the moonlight, the crystal skull shone with a cold and gentle light. It didn't have the slightest temperature, like a piece of ice. Charlotte noticed this when he touched it in the pyramid, but he didn't have time to think about it at that time. Now, he had time and space. He soon discovered something that surprised him. The crystal skull looked heavy, but its actual weight was only about half a kilogram. A normal human skull should weigh about half a kilogram, but it was twice as heavy as a normal skull. But it was definitely not crystal, because in terms of the density of a crystal the size of a human head would weigh at least a few times more. If it wasn't crystal, then what material was it made of? Could it really be the skull of a creature? What kind of creature would have such a skull forever? If the skull was made of a crystal-like material, then what about the other bones of that creature? These questions were unimaginable. Charlotte's left eye twitched slightly. He awakened the X-ray vision of his left eye. His X-ray vision penetrated the right eye socket of the crystal skull. At that moment, Xia Lei's brain suddenly shook violently. It felt like he had been in a dark dungeon for a month and was suddenly thrown into a scorching environment. All he could see was a vast expanse of white light, and he couldn't see anything. Chapter 10:15. The process was excruciating. It felt like someone was poking his eyeball with a needle. What followed was a piercing pain in his nerves. Charlotte felt like his head was about to explode. In the midst of this painful feeling, he saw many glowing substances that looked like gemstone powder in the white light. They surged into his brain like a tide of light, but it wasn't real. He knew very well that it was just an illusion. Why would he have such an illusion? He did not know. An even stranger illusion appeared. Vaguely, he seemed to see a person walking in the white light. He could only see the person's shadow, but not his face. The person walked forward. There seemed to be a door in front of him. Or maybe it was not a door, but a whirlpool made of light. Who was he? Where was he going? Charlotte still did not understand. This seemed to be a message stored in the crystal skull. It was hinting at something. After who knew how long, all the illusions disappeared. Charlotte was the first to return to normal. The starry sky was still clean and beautiful. The light of the moon and stars shone down, covering everything in a mysterious and hazy color. The crystal skull in his hand did not change. It was still cold and mysterious. Phew! Charlotte let out a long sigh. He realized his hands and feet were cold, and the skin on his back was wet with cold sweat. He remained motionless, still holding the crystal skull, but his mind had already left his body and flown far away. He thought about many things: the ancient alloy, the silver metal, the crystal skull, and even the statue of the faceless warrior in the pyramid. They did not belong to this world. Even though he had not solved the final mystery, connecting these things together gave him a very obvious hint. These things did not belong to the civilization on Earth. They came from another civilization beyond Earth. That mysterious civilization had set foot on Earth before the Ice Age and left their traces on this world. They might have perished and existed in the past. They might still exist, but on the distant planets, humans could not contact them. Yes, that must be it. These things will not appear for no reason. Someone has to create them. Humans obviously don't have this ability, so it can only be a higher civilization. Charlotte thought to himself, I assume that there is a more advanced civilization. It may have perished, or it may still exist. However, regardless of whether it has perished or still exists, Zhu Xianwei and the black-robed man could be the survivors of that civilization. They are not creatures from Earth. This conjecture had actually been confirmed a long time ago. That was, Zhu Xianyue ate human brains as food. She was a hunter, and the people of this world were just her prey. To her, humans in this world were the same as chickens, ducks, and fish. They were food that had been reared in captivity and could be slaughtered at will. Of course, he was the only exception. I wonder how Zhu Xianyue is doing now. Is she still in the US? If the black-robed man is her kind, then why would she and the black-robed man kill each other? Thinking of Zhu Xianyue, this question popped up in Charlotte's mind. Questions came one after another. He could understand some of them, but he could not understand some of them no matter how hard he tried. A few minutes later, Charlotte wrapped up the crystal skull and put it back into the equipment bun. He carried his equipment bag, and carried Akiko Tsukino's equipment bag before walking toward the Jewish settlement. When he reached the settlement, there were a few cars coming from Jerusalem. The cars were moving very fast, and their headlights were bright. It's already so late. Who would attack such a remote settlement? Charlotte was instantly alerted. His left eye twitched slightly, and his telescopic ability was awakened. The car at the front was a military off-road vehicle. There was a heavy machine gun mounted on the roof. Even though it was driving in a safe environment, the machine gunner maintained his firing position. There were a few fully armed Israeli soldiers sitting in the car. Their equipment was the equipment of the Israeli Special Forces, and it was very sophisticated. Behind the military off-road vehicle were two black sedans and a police car. The police car was equipped with a siren, but it was not turned on. Charlotte retracted his gaze and ran toward Dr. Heimer's house. He did not know why the special forces, police, and the people in the sedans had come to the settlement at this time, but Charlotte knew that he and Akiko Tsukino had to leave this place. Dr. Heimer's house was dark. Charlotte's footsteps stopped. When he left, Dr. Heimer and Mina were clearly asleep, and when he left, the lights in the living room were on. Akiko Tsukino would not get up to turn off the lights in the living room, so other than Dr. Heimer and his wife, Mina, who else would turn off the lights? The wall that blocked his vision silently disappeared from his left eye's field of view, and the situation in the house could be seen at a glance. There was no one in the living room. There was no one in Dr. Heimer and Mina's room. However, when he moved his gaze toward Akiko Tsukino's room, he saw three people. Akiko Tsukino, who was lying on the bed, Dr. Heimer and Mina, who were standing behind the door. One of the couple was holding an assault rifle while the other was holding a Desert Eagle pistol. The safety of the gun was off, ready to fire at any time. Charlotte gently grabbed the doorknob and opened the door. Then, he tiptoed inside. He pulled out his pistol, the Viper pistol with a silencer. He slowly moved toward Akiko Tsukino's room while maintaining his X-ray vision of the three people in the room. It was then that Akiko Tsukino spoke up. "It is useless, he will kill you." "What are you talking about?" Mina asked coldly. "Do you understand English?" "I understand." I said, "Why are you doing this?" Akiko Tsukino said in English, "We are not bad people. Why are you doing this? Don't try to deceive us." "You must be spies," Mina said. "Why do you say that we are spies?" Akiko Tsukino struggled to get up from the bed. "Lie down." Dr. Heimer shouted at Akiko Tsukino. "You better behave. Otherwise I will kill you." Akiko Tsukino lay down. "You are not a doctor, nor are you a housewife. Who are you?" "Shut up." Mina walked toward Akiko Tsukino and punched Akiko Tsukino's head. Akiko Tsukino, who had just gotten up, fell back on the bed. Her body was still very weak, and she could not fight at all. Otherwise, with her ability and her achievements in killing people, it would not be difficult for her to kill the couple at all. "Are you Mossad's people?" Akiko Tsukino did not shut up. She did not take Heimer and Mina's threats seriously. Charlotte sneered. He had already understood that Akiko Tsukino had actually noticed his return. She was testing and provoking the Jewish couple in order to get information and create opportunities for him to make a move. Mina punched Akiko Tsukino's head again. She said coldly, "I know what you want to do, but what can you do even if you know? You and your companions will die tonight. You have been lurking here. What is your mission?" Akiko Tsukino said. "Kill her." Heimer suddenly said, "She talks too much. That guy will be back soon. We just need to keep one alive." Mina nodded and suddenly raised the Desert Eagle pistol in her hand. Puff! The door trembled. A bullet penetrated the wooden door and instantly pierced Mina's head. She was going to shoot Tsukino Enko with the money in her hand, but before she could pull the trigger, she was shot and killed. Bang! 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 Heimer suddenly pulled the trigger, and the wooden door was instantly torn apart by the rifle bullet. Bang! With a gunshot, Heimer also fell down. Heimer fired at the door, but he ignored one person, and that was Akiko Tsukino, who was lying on the bed. He didn't know how cold-blooded and terrible the woman lying on the bed was. Although she lacked strength, she had no problem shooting him with the Desert Eagle. Charlotte opened the door and shot Heimer in the head. "Let's get out of here. They called for reinforcements. I guess their reinforcements will be here in 5 minutes." Akiko Tsukino got up from the bed, but when she stood on the ground, she swayed and almost fell to the ground again. Charlotte quickly went forward to help her. "Let me carry you. We'll leave in their car. Let's go to Gaza." Akiko Tsukino said, "You drive their car and leave. I'll cover for you." But Charlotte didn't seem to hear what she said. Soon, he received a car key from Heimer's body. "Boss, did you hear what I said? I'm serious," Akiko Tsukino said. As soon as she finished speaking, Charlotte slapped her on the butt and swallowed her in front of her. "Hurry up." Akiko Tsukino was stunned for a moment, and then she climbed onto Charlotte's back. Charlotte carried her on his back and walked out. As he walked, he took out the time bombs from her equipment bag, took them out, activated them one by one, and threw them in a corner that was hard to see. The time of the bombs that he had activated was set to 5 minutes and 30 seconds. After leaving the room, Charlotte went to the garage. He put Akiko Tsukino in the passenger seat, then started the car and rushed out of the garage. He didn't turn on the headlights. Heimer and Mina's car was a Desert Raider produced by an Israeli car company. It was a powerful off-road vehicle. Although it was a civilian version, it could be used. Compared to the military version, it only lacked some weapons and equipment. It could travel unimpeded in the Gobi Desert, and going to Gaza was no problem at all. Just as the Desert Raider drove out of the settlement, the convoy formed by the few cars entered the settlement. Charlotte drove the Desert Raider off the road and climbed up a mound. Then, he turned back to look in the direction of the settlement. From what he saw, several special forces and police officers got out of the cars and quickly surrounded the house. The doors of the 2 black cars also opened, and several men in black suits got out of the cars. They were also holding heavy weapons such as assault rifles and submachine guns. One of the middle-aged men pointed at the door, and an Israeli Special Forces soldier suddenly used his shoulder to knock the door open. The moment the door opened, several armed men in black suits rushed in, followed by the Special Forces and police officers. Charlotte thought to himself, are those guys Mossad's men? The Mossad had been arranging spies in the vicinity. Was it to guard the secret of the pyramid? Or is there another reason? But before he could figure out these questions, there was a loud bang, and the violent explosion shattered the silence under the night sky. The flames shot into the sky, illuminating the night sky. It could be seen several miles away. The Desert Defender started up again, driving in the direction of Gaza. Chapter 10:16. 10 minutes after the explosion, a Nighthawk helicopter flew from a military base on the outskirts of Jerusalem to the settlement. Several armed men in black suits came down from the helicopter to investigate the situation. The residents of the settlement drove in all directions to search. The residents were all armed. Israel was a country where everyone was a soldier. Every adult had to serve in the military. After retiring, they were militia and could go to the battlefield at any time. Then, several drones flew in from the direction of Jerusalem and searched in different directions. They provided aerial reconnaissance for the ground searchers. The Desert Raider ran wildly in the wilderness. Without its headlights on, it was like a beast in the dark. After a while, Siale looked back at the sky and suddenly stopped the car. At this time, the Desert Raider that Charlotte was driving was at least an hour away from Gaza. Akiko Tsukino also realized something. She looked back, but she saw nothing. She asked tentatively, "Boss, are there pursuers?" Charlotte said, "It's the Israeli military's drone." Akiko Tsukino was curious. She had good eyesight, but she didn't see anything. Charlotte, however, had already seen the drone. Are his eyes the eyes of an eagle? Although she was curious, she didn't ask any more questions. I didn't expect them to catch up so quickly. It looks like that couple is really Mossad. Charlotte was very anxious. I asked them what their mission was, and the guy named Heimer told his woman to kill me. I'm guessing they must be protecting the secret of the pyramid, Akiko Tsukino said. It's very close, Charlotte said. Akiko Tsukino looked back again, but she still didn't see anything. Siale's eyes quickly scanned the environment outside the car, and then he saw his eyes move in the direction of the trunk. With just a glance, Charlotte opened the door and went to the back of the car to open the trunk. He opened the trunk door. In the trunk was a bag of flour, a bottle of olive oil, and a large roll of tin foil. It was tin foil for roasting meat and bread, and it was brand new. Charlotte took out the tin foil and quickly went to the front passenger door. He opened the car door, picked up Akiko Tsukino, and ran to the bushes next to the car. What are you trying to do? Akiko Tsukino couldn't understand Charlotte at all. Charlotte placed Akiko Tsukino in the bushes and returned to the Desert Raider. He took out both equipment bags. He did not close the door and quickly ran into the bushes. As soon as he entered the bushes, he grabbed the roll of tin foil and pulled it all out, saying, "Quick, quick, wrap your body with the tin foil." "Wrap my body with tin foil?" Akiko Tsukino still didn't understand Charlotte's motives. The drone's camera has a thermal imaging function. If it captures us, Mossad will definitely send air power. At that time, we won't be able to escape from Israel. As he spoke, Charlotte had already wrapped 2 pieces of tin foil around his body. Akiko Tsukino finally understood, and she also began to wrap the tin foil around her body. In her heart, she admired Siale's knowledge and adaptability on the spot. Charlotte quickly wrapped his entire body with tin foil, and then he helped Akiko Tsukino wrap her body. She had not recovered yet, and her hands and feet were not nimble. He helped her wrap her legs and her waist. Akiko Tsukino wrapped her chest with a piece of tin foil, but because it was too big, she couldn't wrap it properly twice. As soon as she let go, the tin foil would fall. Her breasts were like 2 naughty rabbits, and they just had to go against her at this time. Charlotte grabbed the tin foil and poked it with his fingers. With 2 cracking sounds, he poked 2 holes in the tin foil. Then he pressed the tin foil on Akiko Tsukino's chest, grabbed the highest part, and pulled it out. The problem was solved. Akiko Tsukino stared at Charlotte, dumbfounded. Without any explanation, Charlotte suddenly pushed her into the bushes. He lay on his back in the bushes with her. One of his hands was raised, and his arm wrapped in tin foil just covered the 2 parts that he had poked. The tin foil was rotten, and it was soft under the tin foil. That was the situation. Akiko Tsukino didn't know what to say. "Shoo, it's coming. Don't move," Charlotte said. Akiko Tsukino's big, black eyes looked up at the sky through the gap of the tin foil. Just as her line of sight stopped, a Heron 2 attack drone from the Israel Defense Forces appeared in the sky. The huge wings and the surface-to-surface missiles mounted on the launcher were faintly visible. The Heron 2 drone hovered in the sky, seemingly conducting reconnaissance on the target on the ground. Its target was obviously the desert raider parked in the middle of the wilderness. Behind it, who knew how many people were staring at the satellite image it transmitted back. "Boss, to be honest, I really admire you." Akiko Tsukino's voice was very soft, but it was enough for Charlotte to hear clearly. Charlotte's voice was also very soft. "I actually want to live the life of an ordinary person the most." "That's impossible," Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte smiled bitterly. He also knew that it was already impossible. He was walking on a path of no return. It was just like his body. It was constantly evolving and couldn't degenerate any further. "They said that your body has evolved. Is that true?" "It's true." Charlotte looked at the sky. The Heron 2 was still hovering in the sky, but from its flight trajectory, it had expanded its reconnaissance range. There was no one in the car. The person operating it would most likely think that the people in the car had abandoned the car and escaped. Then, expanding the search range would be the best choice. "Are you good at that?" Akiko Tsukino's voice became even softer. "Charlotte, we might die here. Tell me, I want to know." Charlotte was very embarrassed. "Yes." "What do you mean by yes? What do you think it means?" Charlotte changed the topic. "How much longer does the drone need to continue its reconnaissance?" "Actually, I can guess that you have 4 wives. They are very happy when they are with you. This means that you are very good," Akiko Tsukino said. Why did she ask this question? What did she want to do? At this moment, the Heron 2 drone hovering in the sky suddenly fired an anti-ground missile. The missile flew towards the desert raider in the wilderness with a dazzling fiery tail. Boom! The desert raider was blown to pieces, its wreckage and parts flying in all directions. After blowing up the desert raider, the Heron 2 left the sky and flew in the direction of Gaza. Charlotte got up from the ground, his expression solemn. "The Mossad must have guessed that we are going to Gaza. Who knows how many Mossad and Israel Defense Forces are now on the border of Gaza? Then are we still going?" Charlotte thought for a moment. "Going now is the same as walking right into a trap." "Then where are we going?" Akiko Tsukino asked. "Since they all think we are going to Gaza, then let's go in the opposite direction. The most dangerous place is actually the safest place." "Let's go to Jerusalem," Charlotte said. Akiko Tsukino said, "Even if we don't go to Gaza, we can go to Jordan." "Why do we have to go to Jerusalem?" "Jordan's border must also be closely monitored. If you can think of it, Mossad can also think of it. We are facing a country, not an enemy. It's very easy for them to seal the border to Jordan and Gaza," Charlotte said. "All right, I'll listen to you. I'm just giving you a suggestion. Even if you go to hell, I will accompany you," Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte smiled. "If you want to go, you should go to heaven. Hell is not good." He reached out and helped her up. Beep 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 beep. At that moment, Charlotte's satellite phone suddenly rang. He took out the satellite phone and answered the call. His voice was low. "It's me. Boss, I only have 30 seconds. Listen carefully." It was Sayamu's voice. "We are being chased by Mossad and are hiding in Gaza." "Where are you?" Charlotte said, "Akiko and I are in the suburbs of Jerusalem. Don't come to Gaza. The border has been sealed and a large number of Israel Defense Forces are on the move." Charlotte frowned. Sayamu's situation was exactly as he had guessed. "Where are you going next?" "Jerusalem," Charlotte said. "Can you come over?" "We can, but we need some time to prepare. Be careful, I'll contact you next time." Sayamu hung up. Charlotte looked at his multifunction watch. The call had lasted exactly 30 seconds, not a second more, not a second less. Sayamu's purpose for calling at this time was very simple. Besides wanting to know about Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino's situation, he also wanted to remind Charlotte about the situation at the border. He was the intelligence expert of the Zodiac team, and he was also from the Middle East. He definitely had more information than Charlotte. It was Siamu's call that made Charlotte feel relieved. It was very important to him that Siamu, Yelena, and Angumi Khan were safe. The two of them left the bush, then turned around and walked in the direction of Jerusalem. However, the two took a new route, bypassing the settlement they had left before. The two were still wrapped in tinfoil, which made a squeaky sound as they walked. Akiko Tsukino looked down at the parts of her feet that were exposed through the holes in the tinfoil. She had a strange expression on her face. Her mind was not thinking about how to get to Jerusalem, but the scene of her being pulled out of the tinfoil kept replaying in her mind. Charlotte's mind was also thinking about other things. The only prehistoric tomb was found under the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and the only pyramid built before death was also found in the suburbs of Jerusalem. Also, the only prehistoric battle with Zhu Xianwei was also carried out in Jerusalem. How did I ignore the existence of Israel? What role did Israel play in this series of events? Yes, his attention had always been on the United States and the FA, and he had never paid attention to Israel. Now Israel was in his sights. But he knew that this was not a good thing. If he had to make a choice between the CIA and Israel's Mossad, he would rather choose the CIA. Mossad's style was unique in the world. Their motto was, "If the enemy wanted to kill you, you should kill them first." "Boss, can I take off the tinfoil? They keep ringing." Akiko Tsukino's voice interrupted Charlotte's thoughts. Charlotte said, "No, keep it. Mossad will not only send one drone." Akiko Tsukino shrugged, and the parts of her feet that were exposed through the holes in the tinfoil shook. Chapter 10:17. The light of dawn had not yet arrived, and the earth and sky had entered the darkest period. On a road into Jerusalem, more than a dozen Israel Defense Forces soldiers with loaded guns were inspecting vehicles and pedestrians. They had photos of two Asians in their hands, but they were two faces that did not exist. Even the Mossad intelligence system could not find the true identity of the two faces. The two Asians in the photo were Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino, who were wanted throughout Israel. At that moment, Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino happened to be near the temporary inspection team. It's really a big effort to catch a few people who don't exist. Who gave the order? Next to a house on the side of the road, Charlotte stood in the corner of the outer wall and looked at the checkpoint about a kilometer away. He was in a bad mood. He was sure he had missed something, but he could not figure out what it was. Akiko Tsukino also moved to Charlotte's side and looked in the same direction with high-powered military binoculars. She also saw the checkpoint about a kilometer away, but she could only see lights and blurry figures. She could not see clearly at all. She could not see the situation at the checkpoint as clearly as Charlotte could with the high-powered binoculars, but she also knew what the situation was over there. The road into the city has also been blocked. Akiko Tsukino frowned. The person in charge of this operation must be a big shot, and he most likely knows the secret of the pyramid. I think his goal may be the crystal skull we took from the pyramid. For some reason, the man with the king cobra tattoo suddenly appeared in Charlotte's mind. In the video shot by George, the man with the king cobra tattoo did not show his face. Only his back and the king cobra tattoo on his arm could be seen. His brain replayed the video, but what he could see was too little. Even if the man passed by him now, as long as he covered the king cobra tattoo on his arm with his sleeve, he would not be able to recognize him. "Boss, what do we do now?" Akiko Tsukino asked. Charlotte said, "They have our photos in their hands and are comparing them to the vehicles and pedestrians passing through the checkpoint. We have to change our appearance. Then we need to find a safe place." Akiko Tsukino looked around. The place she wanted was a forest. Charlotte shifted his gaze to the house beside him. After a few seconds, he withdrew his gaze and walked towards the outer wall of the courtyard. Akiko Tsukino did not hesitate and followed Charlotte to the door. Charlotte's healing had already taken effect, and she had now recovered about 1/3 of her original state. The courtyard door was locked, but this was not a problem for Charlotte, who had learned from Qin Xiang. He used only a steel wire to open the lock. He pushed open the door and walked in with Akiko Tsukino. Akiko Tsukino pulled out the Viper pistol. "No need, there's no one," Charlotte said. Akiko Tsukino was stunned for a moment. In her eyes, Charlotte was already a godlike existence. His body was full of mystery, and her curiosity about him had already swelled to the extreme. There was no one in the house, and the owner was a single man. His room was pasted with a lot of large posters of sexy girls, as well as many discs and men's magazines, and a desktop computer. Charlotte opened the equipment bag, and took out the makeup tools and materials from the equipment bag and placed them on the computer table. He took off the human skin mask on his face, and Akiko Tsukino did the same. "Lie down and rest for a while. I'll wake you up when I'm done," Charlotte said. Akiko Tsukino nodded and lay down on the bed to rest. Her body was already very weak, and after staying up all night and walking for such a long distance, she was really tired. Charlotte reworked the 2 human skin masks and turned them into the faces of 2 Native Americans. Native Americans and Asians had the same skin color, or even more yellow, which was why he turned the 2 human skin masks into Native Americans. After finishing the human skin masks, Charlotte was not in a hurry to wake up Akiko Tsukino. He turned on the computer of the owner of the house. The computer of the owner of the house did not have any protection at all, but the configuration was relatively low, far less powerful than his hacker computer. However, even if it was a normal computer, as long as his brain cooperated, he could still hack. About 10 minutes later, Charlotte entered the traffic system of Jerusalem, and the surveillance images of the roads he wanted appeared on the computer monitor. There were checkpoints on the main roads of Jerusalem, and there were also checkpoints set up by the Israel Defense Forces with live ammunition. However, no one could really surround a city, and there were some remote places where the Israel Defense Forces soldiers did not set up checkpoints. There would be no problem entering Jerusalem from those places. During this process, Charlotte had already drawn a safe route in his mind. With this safe route, he could wake up Akiko Tsukino now, take her into Jerusalem, and then find a place to wait for Sayamu, Yelena, and Angumi Khan to meet up with him. After obtaining the safe route he wanted, Charlotte moved the surveillance images to Tel Aviv airport. It was not that he wanted to take a plane out of Israel, but he just wanted to see the situation at the airport. The surveillance images of Tel Aviv airport quickly appeared on the computer monitor. There were a large number of Israel Defense Forces soldiers patrolling outside the airport. Even though it was still dawn, they did not let their guard down. The situation in the departure hall was the same. Everyone waiting for their flight was under the surveillance of the police and soldiers. The Israelis even used riot dogs to sniff the hearts of the passengers. As long as there were weapons and ammunition, the dogs would give a warning. Could the Israeli president have given the order? Isn't this too much? Charlotte's lips curled into a bitter smile. He really wanted to understand how the situation had developed to such an exaggerated point, but he had no clue. At that moment, a few people suddenly walked out of the security checkpoint and entered the arrival hall. There were Mexicans, Asians, and Europeans among them. Although there were only a few of them, they were diverse. However, the surveillance images were not very clear, and he could not see the details of their faces. There are no flights to Tel Aviv airport at this time. These people are coming out of the airport at this time, so they must have taken a private plane. Who would take a private plane to Tel Aviv at this time? Charlotte was a little curious, so he enlarged the surveillance images. The quality of the enlarged surveillance images was not high, but he could clearly see the facial features of those people. Charlotte's eyes fell on one of the faces, and he was stunned. The guy he had his eyes on was an old white man. He was skinny but very spirited. His whole person was like a sharpened knife. This old man was the chief instructor of the FA organization, Augustman. Charlotte's eyes then moved to the face next to Augustman. It was an Asian face, and that guy was none other than Yen Fo, the military advisor of the FA organization. Back in the United States, Augustman and Yen Fo led the elite killers of the FA organization to chase him all the way from Washington to the Mexican border. Later, he used the Predator B to attack the convoy that went to the farm to kill him. At that time, he was sure that everyone was dead, including Augustman and Yen Fo. Later, Zelota appeared in the capital to assassinate him, and he suspected that the two were still alive. He wanted to keep Zelota alive, and one of the reasons was to ask Zelota about Augustman and Yen Fo. Unexpectedly, after Zelota blew herself up, Augustman and Yen Fo came into his sight in this way. Why are the people of the FA organization here? Moreover, they are big shots like Augustman and Yen Fo. Does the FA organization also know the secret of the crystal skull? If so many people know the secret of the crystal skull, why have they blocked the entrance to the pyramid all these years and not tried to take it away? Charlotte was confused. Indeed, if the people of the FA organization also knew the secret of the crystal skull, with the style of the FA organization, even if taking away the crystal skull would cause the pyramid to collapse, and everyone who entered the pyramid would be crushed to death, they would still do it. If the FA organization knew, then how could the even more powerful CIA not know? If the CIA knew, with the strength of the United States, even if they moved the entire pyramid, they would still take away the crystal skull. Therefore, the possibility of these two possibilities was very low, especially the latter. However, ruling out the possibility that the FA organization knew the secret of the crystal skull, Charlotte couldn't figure out why Augustman and Yen Fo would come to Israel at this time. In the surveillance screen, several people of the FA organization were stopped by several soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces. An anti-riot dog barked at Augustus, looking extremely ferocious. However, the sound of the dog barking could not be heard in the surveillance screen at all. Charlotte's eyes then locked on the surveillance screen, and he used lip reading to interpret the conversation that was about to begin. A second lieutenant spoke in English, asking Augustman and the others to show their IDs and allow a body search. Augustman did not speak, but Yen Fo asked the reason. The answer given by the second lieutenant was that he suspected they were hiding weapons on their bodies. Yen Fo stopped talking to the Israeli second lieutenant. He took out his phone and made a call. Charlotte's eyes locked on Yen Fo's lips, and he interpreted his words. "We're here. We have a little trouble at the airport. Please tell your people." Then, he handed the phone to the second lieutenant. The second lieutenant took the phone that Yen Fo handed to him. "Hello? Yes, okay." After a simple conversation, he handed the phone to Yen Fo and said, "Sorry, because I don't know the situation. You can go now. If you need me to send a car, I can arrange it for you." Only then did Augustman speak. "No need." With that, he walked to the entrance of the arrival hall. Yen Fo continued to talk to someone as he walked. 48 Holy Cross Street. "Okay, we'll meet soon." With that, he hung up the phone. Charlotte adjusted the surveillance screen to the outside of the arrival hall. Augustman and Yen Fo walked out of the arrival hall. There were already 2 Mercedes-Benz cars parked on the road outside the door. The people of the FA organization got into the 2 Mercedes-Benz cars, and then drove in the direction of Jerusalem. Charlotte logged out of the surveillance system and turned off the computer. He walked to the bed, reached out, and patted Akiko Tsukino's cheek. "Hey, wake up. It's time to put on makeup." Akiko Tsukino opened her eyes. She nodded and then added, "Can you help me change my dressing? My wound is itchy." Charlotte. Chapter 10:18. The light of dawn dispelled the darkness, and sunlight returned to the ancient land. The golden sunlight shone on the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the dome of the mosque. The two holy places looked extremely solemn and holy. Over the past thousands of years, countless people had lost their lives because of them, and the conflict was still going on. No one knew when it would end. Jerusalem, Holy Cross Street. Two Native Americans walked into a restaurant that sold breakfast. The two Native Americans looked very young. The man looked to be 22 or 23 years old, and the woman looked to be in her early 20s. The two of them were carrying backpacks and wearing ethnic accessories. They looked like a pair of Native Americans who had come to Israel for a holiday. The two Native Americans were Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino. With the human skin mask and magical makeup skills, even Charlotte couldn't recognize himself, let alone the people who wanted to catch him. The two sat down at a table next to the window. Charlotte ordered and looked out the window at the street outside. 48 Holy Cross Street was just across the street. It was a very old house that looked like it had been around for hundreds of years. The main body was made of stone. There were 3 floors, and the 2 sides extended forward, forming a concave shape. Such a house could have been the mansion of a knight or lord during the Crusade. It also looked like a French medieval architectural style. Now, who was the owner of this house? On this point, the 2 armed Israeli soldiers standing at the door had already given the answer. The Israeli government was the current owner of this old house. The armed soldiers guarding the door meant that this place was not an ordinary place. However, Charlotte did not see any signs, such as Jerusalem Holy Cross Street Office, or Jerusalem Holy Cross Street Committee. If only Siamu was here. He must know what kind of place this is, Charlotte thought. He was looking forward to meeting up with Siamu, Yelena, and Angumi Khan. The waiter brought the food. It was a traditional Israeli breakfast: sour olives, salted fish, and egg custard. Charlotte ate as he continued to observe the old building across from him. This time, he awakened the ability of his left eye and let his gaze penetrate the closed and curtained window. He was shocked by what he saw. The old building across from him was a very modern office. In the central hall on the first floor, there was a television wall that took up almost the entire wall. It showed surveillance footage from important places in Jerusalem, such as bus stations, airports, and so on. There were almost no blind spots. In addition, there were more advanced satellite surveillance images that covered all of Israel, including Jordan, the Gaza Strip, and the area bordering Egypt. There were many staff members working in the hall. Some were answering phones, some were operating drones, and some were dispatching field personnel on the ground. It looked very busy, but the scene was orderly and extremely strict. In fact, just by looking at the central hall, Xiaolei could already deduce that this seemingly ordinary ancient building was not an ordinary government agency, but an intelligence agency. Charlotte's gaze moved to the second floor. He saw some offices and an equipment warehouse. There were some people working in the office, but he didn't know any of them. He didn't see anyone from the FA organization on the second floor. He moved his gaze to the third floor and looked through the window on the third floor. The third floor was a multi-purpose area. There was a training ground for fighting and a place for treatment. Some people were training their fighting skills, and some were treating their injuries. His gaze swept through all the windows on the third floor. Charlotte still didn't see anyone from the FA organization. He withdrew his gaze. He couldn't see through the thick stone walls and mud to see what was going on underground, but there must be a space underground. Is this the headquarters of the Mossad? Or a very important subbase? Who did the FA organization come here to see? Charlotte was confused. The FA organization was now equivalent to a dog of the United States. It wasn't a problem for them to come to Israel and contact the people of the Mossad. But the problem was that Yen Fo and Augustman, who came to Israel, were both very important figures of the FA organization. What was their purpose in coming to Israel? Charlotte naturally thought that they were here to kill him, but this idea was quickly erased by him because he was already dead. He was assassinated by Eugene Lee in China. His funeral was held in China, and the whole country mourned him. The level of this show was so high. How could the people of the FA organization suspect that he was still alive and chase him to Israel? In fact, his trip to Israel this time was hidden from even Liang Xiao and Long Bing. His women didn't know, so how could the people of the FA organization know? There must be some other reason. What the hell is this? It tastes so bad. Akiko Tsukino spat out a sour olive. She was so sour that she was about to cry. She had also observed the old building opposite, but she didn't find anything. Charlotte lowered his voice. Israel's climate is dry, water is scarce, and food is scarce. Most of the food is pickled, so make do with it. When you leave here, you can eat whatever you want. Also, you must communicate in English. The building opposite is the place of the Mossad. Be careful of your every move. Akiko Tsukino looked at the old building opposite in surprise, then nodded. She didn't know how Charlotte knew that the old building opposite was the place of the Mossad, but she believed in Charlotte. Just then, an Israeli man walked out of the old building opposite and went straight to the restaurant. Charlotte's gaze moved to the Israeli man, and in almost 2 seconds, he conducted a comprehensive examination on him. The Israeli man had a desert eagle and a pass card with his name on it, Hallie. There were many wounds on his body, including gunshot wounds and knife wounds. Based on his age in his 30s, it wasn't difficult to tell that he was a veteran Special Forces soldier who had joined the Mossad after retiring. A considerable part of the Mossad's spies and agents were recruited from retired Special Forces soldiers. They were battle-hardened and experienced. When they went to the Mossad to receive higher levels of training, their comprehensive strength could be imagined. In the world of spies and agents, there was a popular saying that the Mossad's ability to collect intelligence, assassinate, and steal was the strongest. The equally famous American CIA, Britain's MI6, and Russia's Russian Federal Security Service, KRUP, couldn't compare. Therefore, even if an ordinary agent appeared in his field of vision, Charlotte would be alert. He nudged Akiko Tsukino under the table. Don't talk. The people from the Mossad are here. Akiko Tsukino nodded. She could also tell that Hallie, who was crossing the road, wasn't an ordinary person. She had her way. Hallie crossed the road and entered the restaurant. A waiter greeted him with a smile. Mr. Hallie, is it the same this time? Yes, the same. Hallie's gaze quickly swept across the restaurant and finally stopped at the table where Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino were sitting. Charlotte didn't look at him as he ate the egg soup with a spoon. His gaze was fixed on the reflective surface of the stainless steel spoon, observing Hallie through the reflection. The waiter said to the direction of the kitchen, "Mr. Hade's breakfast, the same as always, sour olives and hard bread." Hallie withdrew his gaze from Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino. In terms of the ability to disguise, if Charlotte called himself the second best in the world, then no one in the world would dare to call themselves the best. His disguise as Li Yuden could fool the CIB's spies, and he could even fool the extremely cunning Mai Hattori. Fooling a Mossad agent wasn't a problem at all. The kitchen quickly prepared the food that Hallie wanted, sour olives and hard bread, but it wasn't on a plate, but in a cardboard box with a plastic bag on the outside. Hallie took the food, paid for it, and walked out with the food. But when Hallie crossed the parallel line, Charlotte's gaze shifted to Hallie's back and instantly awakened his X-ray vision. His gaze cut open Hallie's back and went straight to his stomach. He saw a wriggling stomach filled with sausages, cheese, and waffles. Seeing the type of food in the stomach so clearly, Hallie had clearly just had breakfast. Why would he buy breakfast? And why would he buy disgusting and cheap sour olives and hard bread? At this moment, the waiter was chatting with his colleague. He said, "What a strange guy, buying the same food every day. I've worked here for 3 years, and he buys the same food every day. Is he that interested in sour olives and hard bread? I've seen the car he's driving. It looks like a Toyota Jeep worth 200,000 NIS. His colleague said, "Yeah, a high-paid government worker, but he's interested in junk food." Hey, don't say that, there are customers in the shop. Are you talking about those two Native Americans? It would be strange if they understood what we're talking about. He just ordered in English. That's true. Well, the people in the opposite building are very strange. The two waiters chatted casually, and soon, the topic shifted to a girl they both knew. Charlotte lost interest in eavesdropping, and his gaze moved to the opposite building again. If it weren't for the conversation between the two waiters and the information he had just captured, he wouldn't have thought that Hallie buying breakfast was so strange. Hallie had indeed eaten breakfast, but he might have bought it for a colleague, and that person was interested in sour olives and hard bread. But after hearing the conversation between the two waiters, he didn't think so. For 3 years, he bought the same food almost every morning. Even if Hallie didn't eat it himself, he shouldn't have such a perverted colleague, right? Who would eat junk food every day? A keyword suddenly emerged in Charlotte's mind: prisoner. Only prisoners would eat awful junk food, and eat the same junk food every day, because they had no choice, because of punishment. After the keyword, prisoner, emerged in his mind, Charlotte's thoughts were suddenly activated. The young waiter said that he had been here for 3 years, and Hallie had bought the same sour olives and hard bread for 3 years, so the prisoner had been locked up for more than 3 years. There was no trial, and he wasn't sent to prison, but he had been locked up in the headquarters or a branch of Mossad. What was the identity of that person? Why was he treated like this? The FA organization came to Israel at this time and contacted the people of Mossad. Could it be for the prisoner? He couldn't figure it out, but Charlotte already had an impulse in his heart. He wanted to see the prisoner, not for anything else, but because of the involvement of the FA organization. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. However, this was still just a bold guess. Whether there was a prisoner or not, it needed to be proven. Let's go. Charlotte got up. Akiko Tsukino put down the spoon, then got up and left with Charlotte. Chapter 10-19. A high-end and safe residence, a modified off-road vehicle for action, and a hacker's computer with the highest configuration. In this world, as long as you had money, you could buy most things. In the presidential suite of the Hilton Hotel, Charlotte's fingers were typing on the new hacker's computer. The monitor of the hacker's computer quickly displayed a set of traffic surveillance footage, which was the surveillance footage of number 48 Holy Cross Road. The old building was quiet at night. Some windows were lit, but the people behind the windows could not be seen. There were 2 armed Special Forces soldiers standing at the gate, but they were no longer the 2 in the morning. They had been replaced. Charlotte quickly pulled up the surveillance footage of the day, and then looked for the faces of Yen, Fo and Augustman from the FA organization. However, he only saw the FA organization's car enter, but not come out. Until he finished fast-forwarding the surveillance footage, he couldn't find the faces of the 2 guys, Augustman and Yen Fo. Those 2 guys only go in and don't come out. What are they doing inside? Charlotte couldn't help but guess, and then he thought of the keyword, prisoner. Drip, 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 the sound of water coming from the bathroom interrupted Charlotte's thoughts. He suddenly remembered something, and he said to the bathroom, "Akiko, your wound hasn't healed yet. How can you take a shower? Your wound will fester easily if it gets wet. Don't wash it, come out quickly." Akiko Tsukino's voice came from the bathroom. "It's okay, I wrapped my butt with plastic wrap." Charlotte. His brain couldn't help but imagine the Japanese ninja's big white ball wrapped in a layer of plastic wrap. Also, the plastic wrap should be transparent, right? Oh, water got in. The Japanese ninja's voice came from the bathroom again, sounding very annoyed. Charlotte smiled bitterly and didn't respond. So be it. She asked for it. who told her not to wrap her but properly. Charlotte's eyes moved to the hacker's computer again, and then he started a new operation. A stock trading app popped up. Ever since he started preparing for his death, he hadn't paid attention to his gains in the US stock market. But in fact, he also made arrangements. Before he began to prepare for his death, he used the hypnosis command given by Zhu Xianyue to activate the puppet Hornick he placed in Wall Street. Hornick was a senior securities manager with an annual salary of more than $1 million. It was not a big problem to activate the accounts of the 4 female knights. It was just that the money they earned could not be compared to his. Charlotte soon checked the funds in the accounts of the 4 female knights. The total funds in their accounts were $188 billion. $1 billion USD is Yuan Group shares, and the rest is Google, Apple, and Microsoft shares. Before he activated Hornick, the total amount of funds in the accounts of the 4 female knights had already reached $2.099 billion USD. Hornick only helped him earn tens of millions of USD, and that was on the basis of the foundation he laid. But even so, Hornick's strength was still top-notch. Before activating Hornick, Charlotte heavily invested in Yuan Group's shares. He didn't touch Google, Apple, and Microsoft shares at all. But now, Hornick was gradually dumping Yuan Group's shares and speeding up the process of buying Google, Apple, and Microsoft shares. If this continues, in a few days, Hornick will dump all of Yuan Group's shares and buy all of Google, Apple, and Microsoft shares. Now Yuan Group's shares have fallen to $8, and the downward trend is still very serious. The market prospects are bleak. In the face of such a situation, Charlotte can't blame Hornick, because Hornick has other people's experience and operating methods. He has so much funds in his account. As a senior securities manager, Hornick's first thought is the safety of funds, followed by profits, and a stable way of making profit. But he can bite his opponent on the battlefield like a hungry wolf. I don't know if Tianyin will think that I don't want to help her, so I dumped Yuan Group shares. Charlotte shook his head. No, in her eyes, I'm already dead. How could she think of this? Charlotte turned off the stock trading software. He didn't intend to correct his puppet's operation, because now is not the time to make money, but the time to fight. Akiko Tsukino was still taking a bath in the bathroom, and she was humming a Japanese folk song. The general meaning of the song was that a young woman was taking a bath, and her lover was peeping at the door. She hit him with the soap, but accidentally fell to the ground. Her butt made a paw sound, paw sound, paw sound, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. The lyrics were very magical. Charlotte smiled bitterly and shook his head. He turned on the TV and continued to monitor 48 Holy Cross Road while watching TV. The TV was playing a news program, and a blonde Israeli anchor read the news in Hebrew. China's father of rifles, the vice president of the Academy of Sciences, the founder and chairman of Rema Group, Charlotte, was assassinated. His funeral was held in Kyoto, and the whole country mourned. The picture on the TV switched to the scene of the funeral. Charlotte was lying in a coffin, and his face was pale and bloodless. White roses and white chrysanthemums were piled up beside him. Fan Fan was wearing mourning clothes, standing next to the coffin and weeping. Liang Xiao, Long Bing, and Jiang Rui accompanied her. They didn't wear mourning clothes, but only wore mourning clothes. There were many big figures at the funeral, some from the political world, some from the military, but no one from the business world. The guests at the funeral looked very simple, and the personnel situation was not complicated. This situation was very normal. The people above knew that he was faking his death, so they deliberately played along with him. Of course, the people above would not want people with ulterior motives to sneak into the funeral and find out. This was a national blockbuster, just like the incident during the Cold War when the United States tricked the Soviet Union into landing on the moon. Akiko Tsukino walked out of the bathroom, wrapped in a thin bath towel. The bath towel was tied in a half knot on her chest, and the extra part was stuffed into her chest, so that at least a third of her snow-white skin was exposed. The half knot was very loose, as if it could fall at any time. The bath towel wasn't long, and it only covered her pert buttock. The size of the miniskirt was a little short. Under it, her snow-white legs were exposed to the air without any cover, and they were natural and unrestrained, allowing people to admire them. Her legs weren't as beautiful as Liang Xiao's, but they weren't bad either. She was petite, but her legs were very long. Charlotte took a look, then looked away awkwardly. He continued to watch the television. The news about his death had ended, and it was replaced by news in Israel. The content was actually the explosion that happened in a settlement on the outskirts of Jerusalem last night. Last night there was an explosion in the suburbs of Jerusalem. A doctor and his wife were killed on the spot, as well as more than a dozen militiamen. The police have initially determined that this was a terrorist attack, and the suspects are two Asians. If any citizens discover this clue, please contact the police immediately. A sketch of a Chinese man and woman appeared on the television. It was the drawing of Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino's last makeup appearance. A sneer appeared on Charlotte's lips. The suspect had changed from Asian to Native American. How could the people of Israel discover him and Akiko Tsukino, and then provide clues to the police? Akiko Tsukino sat down beside Charlotte and wiped the water from her hair with a towel. Her body smelled fragrant. The smell wasn't very strong, but it was alluring enough. "Boss, help me bandage my wound." "It's in the water," Akiko Tsukino said. She also pretended to watch the television, but the corner of her eye was on Charlotte. Charlotte was also watching the television, but the corner of his eye was on Akiko Tsukino's legs. She was sitting, and the bath towel was naturally pulled up. It was already very short, and when it was pulled up, it was even shorter. In that case, what was the point of its existence? He knew that he shouldn't be doing this, but he couldn't control his eyes at all. He felt like a cat with a plump fish in front of it. Was there a cat in this world that didn't want to eat fish? If he wanted to eat the fish in front of him, he could eat it immediately. And it was the Japanese way of eating, sashimi and so on. However, when he thought of the 4 pregnant women at home, he had to endure it and take care of the rest of his life. Charlotte got up. "I'll go get the medicine box. Don't you want to take a look at the wound first?" Akiko Tsukino said. Then she got up from the sofa, raised her hips, and pulled up the bath towel herself. In that second, Charlotte's heart was completely in a mess. The line of defense that he had painstakingly built was also shaking, and it could collapse at any time. Akiko Tsukino's wound had already scabbed, and it was healed. Her so-called bandaging of the wound was not necessary at all. Xia Lei understood what she was thinking. She wanted to fulfill the promise he had made in the pyramid, but wasn't that promise just a mess? He had never made that kind of promise. Akiko Tsukino turned around and looked at Charlotte with tender eyes. "Just this once, fulfill my wish, okay?" Charlotte's first reaction was to shake his head, but his head seemed to be filled with lead. It was very heavy, and he couldn't shake it at all. He was facing a woman who was willing to die for him at any time. She was attracted to him, she liked him, and she only had this one wish. How could he have the heart to reject her? Akiko Tsukino smiled. "Don't worry, your wives won't know, I promise you." Charlotte nodded his head gently. It was just a gentle nod, and even he himself wondered if he had nodded. However, this did not affect the Japanese ninja's judgment. Her face showed a sweet and excited smile, and then she reached out to grab the simple half knot and gently pulled it out. The bath towel slipped from her jade-like skin and fell to the ground without a sound. Charlotte was stunned. In his eyes, she was as beautiful as a cherry blossom at the foot of Mount Fuji in Japan. She was snow-white and delicate, like a living flower fairy. She was humble and docile, she was tough and brave, and she was mature and seductive. She leaned toward him and kissed him on the lips. He froze for a moment, and then he was like an enraged beast. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. The doorbell suddenly rang. Chapter 10:20. Charlotte closed the door. How did you find this place? Siamu shook his head. I don't know. I'm from the Arab world, and I'm an enemy of Israel. I don't know much about the situation in Jerusalem, and I don't dare to develop my intelligence system here. Mossad, who would want to go against Mossad? Why are you apologizing to me? Akiko Tsukino held his face. That time doesn't count. In the living room, Yelena and Gyumi Khan and Siamu were already sitting on the sofa waiting for him. Akiko Tsukino nodded with a smile and bowed to send Charlotte away. The humility and meekness of a Japanese woman was displayed in her. Akiko Tsukino got up, bounced her legs, and her petite body flew towards Charlotte. Her legs spread out in the air, and like a sharp pair of scissors, she clamped Charlotte's neck. In just a second, her legs rested on Charlotte's shoulders, and her buttocks rested in a position parallel to his neck. Akiko Tsukino returned to her room. Charlotte said a few words to Angumi-kan, then got up and went to Akiko Tsukino's room. He didn't knock on the door. When he pushed the door open and entered, Akiko Tsukino was lying on the bed, her buttocks and slender waist forming a seductive wavy curve. She pressed her head with a pillow, knowing that someone had come in, but she didn't look back. Yelena reached out and patted Charlotte's shoulder, whispering, "There is a strand of her hair on your shoulder. I've taken it off for you. You're welcome." Akiko Tsukino glared at him, but she wasn't really angry. Charlotte said, "That's why I want to find out who the prisoner is. I suspect that the FA organization's appearance here has something to do with our operation." Charlotte lowered his voice. "It's Yelena, Siamu, and Angumi-kan. They're here." A mysterious smile appeared on Yelena's face. She knew the secret, but she didn't want to say it. 2 centimeters. Boss. Angumi-kan came out of the storage space under the dining car and said with a smile, "You must not know that I'm here too, right?" Yelena smiled. "Boss, why are you doing this? The Zodiac Squad does not need such hypocritical democracy. You are our leader, our boss. Whatever you say, we will do. We'll listen to you." Yelena said, "After you went in, the satellite phone had no signal at all. We couldn't contact you and Akiko. That place has been monitored. Not long after you went in, we found Mossad's people. We couldn't contact you, but in that case, we had to distract Mossad's people. Otherwise, if they found out that you went in, they only needed to guard the exit, and you had no chance to escape." Charlotte had expected Siamu to provide more information, but he didn't expect it to be like this. He said, "Okay, then I'll tell you." He pointed to the screen. "I suspect that it's the headquarters of Mossad or a branch base." She was like a pink flea. Akiko Tsukino's waist suddenly leaned back, and her upper body bent like a bow. Her hands were on Charlotte's thighs, and then she left Charlotte's body with a beautiful dance movement. Walking out of the door, Charlotte secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Then he used his ability to control his nerves to make his body return to normal. He had to do this, because if he did nothing, Angumi-kan and Siamu would easily find out the secret between him and Akiko Tsukino. Angumi-kan was fine, but Siamu was a problem. He also knew that Siamu liked Akiko Tsukino. Now, he didn't know how to deal with this kind of thing. This problem gave him a headache just thinking about it. Only then did Charlotte come to his senses. He hurriedly climbed up from Akiko Tsukino's body. Yelena reached out and pressed the doorbell again. Charlotte bit the bullet and said, "Akiko, just now. I'm sorry, I was too impulsive." But he still endured it and bit the bullet and said, "Akiko, I'm sorry." Akiko Tsukino couldn't see it, but Charlotte did. 2 hotel waiters, a man and a woman, were standing outside the door, pushing a dining cart. His eyes swept over the faces of the 2 waiters, and his tense nerves suddenly relaxed. Charlotte said, Angumi-kan, you can stay. Yelena and Sayamu, you can leave for a while. Go back and change your clothes before coming back. Don't worry about the surveillance cameras in the corridor. I will make them blind. Only then did Akiko Tsukino take the pillow away. She turned over and looked at Charlotte with hot eyes. Her posture changed, and so did her curve. Her chest and flat lower abdomen formed a graceful curve. The Japanese ninja's body was so mature and attractive no matter from which angle, without any blind spots. Akiko Tsukino's mouth suddenly curled up. Since Angumi-kan said so, she really couldn't find any excuse to drive him out. She was obviously very unhappy. Why was it so difficult to realize her wish? Charlotte said, Don't you know? Charlotte, whoever got her heart, she would unlock all the positions for that person. The man and the woman who were entangled suddenly stopped and looked nervously in the direction of the door. The smile on Yelena's face became more mysterious. She knew why Akiko Tsukino wanted her, Sayamu and Angumi-kan to leave, but she still didn't say it. At this time, Yelena suddenly came to Charlotte's side and then said in his ear, Boss, what were you doing with Akiko just now? I was hiding in the dining car. The surveillance didn't capture me, so I can stay, said Angumi-kan. Akiko, are you okay? Sayamu asked with concern. What is this place? Sayamu asked curiously. Yelena, Sayamu and Angumi-kan looked at the crystal skull in shock. Charlotte said, Come in. Yelena, Sayamu and Angumi-kan all nodded. I agree. Akiko Tsukino's voice came from behind. She changed her clothes again. It was a very normal set of casual clothes. Charlotte walked over. He put his hacker computer on the coffee table in front of the three of them and opened the screen. Ding dong, ding dong. Akiko Tsukino said, Leave here. There are surveillance cameras in the corridor. You can't stay here for a long time. Akiko Tsukino's eyes showed disappointment, but this was Charlotte's decision. She would not oppose it. Yelena said, Boss, didn't you already know about this? Why are you asking such a question? You don't look well. What's going on? Love between men and women was like this. Liking someone didn't mean that they could be together. Sometimes you like someone, but your secret love and your feelings were not needed at all. Was this the meaning of her body language? Sayamu said, You have the satellite phone on. Of course we can find you. Charlotte's heart was in a mess. He didn't know if this was the meaning, but he was clear that the Japanese female ninja was trying to capture him in her own way. And he was really a little tempted. After the screen woke up, it showed a surveillance video. It was the surveillance video of number 48 Holy Cross Road. At this time, Akiko Tsukino came out of her room. She had put on gym shorts and a vest, deliberately creating the illusion that she had just been exercising. She came out and looked very surprised. Yelena, why are you here? Who? Akiko Tsukino was still in a state of high tension. Xiaolei's heart was moved. He picked up a backpack next to the sofa and put it on the coffee table. Then he unzipped it and took out the crystal skull. Xiaolei shrugged with an innocent look on his face. Who else but Charlotte would dare to walk into her room like this? Therefore, she didn't need to look back to know who had entered her room. Boss, what do you want to do? Yelena asked. Charlotte said, In the early hours of this morning, I found people from the FA organization in contact with people from Mossad, and then they entered this building. I have been to this street with Akiko. I accidentally got a piece of information that there is a very important prisoner here. I am afraid that the people from the FA organization are here for that prisoner. Charlotte smiled. I can smell your curry when you are still outside the door. Do you think I know you are here? Yelena and Sayamu left, but Angumi-kan stayed. Akiko Tsukino quickly got up from the sofa, then grabbed the bath towel that had fallen on the ground and ran to her room as if she was escaping. Charlotte's eyes then moved to the dining car. Sure enough, as he had guessed, The Indian monkey Angumi Khan was hiding in the storage space under the dining car. Charlotte changed the topic. Tell me, what happened the day before yesterday? When Akiko and I came out, we couldn't see you, and we couldn't contact you. Then the Israeli soldiers appeared. Yelena, who was standing at the door, saw that it was a Native American who opened the door. She actually stretched her hand to the back of her waist. It was a subconscious action to pull out a gun. Charlotte's mind was full of Akiko Tsukino's big white ball and whatever. It would be strange if he was in a state of mind. He asked such a question just to divert the attention of his men. Yelena said, "Then let's kill them." Akiko Tsukino said lightly, "I'm fine." She didn't say much. She knew that Sayamo liked her, but she didn't have any feelings for Sayamo. Not to mention that she had a 2-centimeter relationship with Charlotte. How could she and Sayamo have that kind of relationship? "Boss, they're here." Angumi Khan's voice came from the direction of the living room. Angumi Khan and Sayamo also said, "Yes, we'll listen to you. What you guys did was right. No matter what we went through, it's fine as long as we're safe," Charlotte said. Angumi Khan shrugged. "I haven't eaten curry for a few days. How could I smell curry? Akiko, can you smell curry on me?" When he spoke, Yelena and Sayamo, who were at the door, immediately reacted. The two of them pushed the dining cart into the room. They didn't speak because there was a surveillance camera in the corridor. Charlotte was speechless. Charlotte could have avoided it, but he didn't. He felt that he had done something wrong, and it was only right for her to vent. He was such a person. The first thing he considered was other people's feelings, and then his own. But his indulgence made things even more awkward, because Akiko Tsukino was wearing stretch cotton sports shorts. The extremely thin fabric was like a second layer of skin for her. It exposed some parts of her body, and it was in any shape it should be. Under her deadly scissor leg posture, the elastic cotton fabric tightened. That scene was so stimulating that he couldn't help but want to see it. Akiko Tsukino also breathed a sigh of relief, but then she frowned. These guys, why at this time? Charlotte also tidied himself up, and then walked over to open the door. There were two waiters. The man was Sayamo, and the woman was Yelena. Charlotte walked to her bedside and coughed softly. "Akiko, just now," Charlotte was silent for a moment before he said, "This is very dangerous. I can't let you take such a risk because of me. How about this, we vote to decide. If you don't agree, we won't go." Charlotte said, "I'll go out and have a look. You can change your clothes and come out too." Angumi Khan said in surprise, "Boss, you're not thinking of attacking the Mossad's headquarters to rescue the prisoner who we don't even know, are you?" Akiko Tsukino couldn't see what was going on outside the door. She subconsciously reached for her gun, but then she realized that she didn't have a gun. When she came, she only had a bath towel on her, and now it was on the carpet. A chicken was a chicken. She had a strong ability in this aspect. No. Charlotte actually felt guilty. Chapter 10:21. There was a little rain in the morning, and the dry Jerusalem was moisturized. The ancient city also had a touch of spring. Hud walked out of the restaurant with a bag of food in his hand. The bag was filled with sour olives and a piece of black hard bread. He crossed the street and walked into 48 Holy Cross Road. The two SWAT soldiers guarding the door greeted him, and he smiled. He walked through the lobby and entered a corridor. At the end of the corridor was a stone staircase. He walked down the stone staircase and entered another corridor. The corridor was dim, and the air was humid. The stone floor didn't feel dry either. On both sides of the corridor were cells, very old cells. Some of the stone walls were carved with Arabic words, meaning God is eternal, long live God, and so on. There were also some wishes, such as regaining freedom, finding love, or a piece of land. Judging from the inscriptions carved on the walls, this place was probably used to imprison prisoners from the Arab world during the Crusades. It was a chaotic time when one god fought another. Hud kept walking. At the end of the corridor, there was a door made of wood and iron. The wood was very thick, and the iron was also very thick. It looked very sturdy. There were 2 braziers on both sides of the door. They were made of copper and had the insignia of the Crusaders on them. They looked very old, but they were no longer in use. They were just decorations on the wall. Instead, they were replaced by an LED ceiling lamp. The white light illuminated the space, and it looked very cold. Hud walked to the iron door. He opened it with a key and walked in with the bag of food. Behind the iron door was a cell about 20 square meters. There was no bed, just some weeds on the floor. A man lay in the weeds. He was thin and dressed in rags. His messy hair reached his waist. From his hair, it wasn't hard to tell that he had been locked up here for a long time. It could have been years, or even 10. There was a wooden bucket in the corner of the cell. It was filled with excrement, and the smell was very unpleasant. But the long-haired man was sleeping soundly. He didn't even bat an eyelid when Hud came in. Hud threw the plastic bag onto the grass, then kicked the long-haired man's thigh and said rudely, "Hey, bastard! Your food is here, damn it, get up and eat. You have a visitor today." "Who is it?" The long-haired man finally opened his eyes. "Cut the crap," Hud berated. The man suddenly jumped up from the haystack and kicked at the vital spot between Hard's legs. When he was lying on the ground, he was like a dead dog that had his tendons pulled out and his bones broken. He had no strength left in his body. However, when he attacked, he was like a venomous snake lurking in the grass. It was fine if he didn't move, but once he moved, he would take someone's life. Hud jerked back. Gotcha! The long-haired man's leg was suddenly grabbed by the chain. His toes were only 2 centimeters away from Hard's vitals. But he couldn't kick past those 2 centimeters. The chain that imprisoned him was only so long, not even a centimeter longer. Even so, Hard was still frightened by him. Furious, he pulled out a Desert Eagle and pointed the gun at the long-haired man's head. "Bastard! Do you really think I won't dare to kill you?" The long-haired man raised his hand and parted the dirty hair that covered his face, revealing his face. It was a thin face with a long beard. It made him look like a man who was almost 50 years old. However, there were no wrinkles at the corners of his eyes. That was a sign of youth. He looked terrible, but his eyes were very sharp, like the eyes of a bloodthirsty beast. There was a king cobra tattoo on his raised arm. It had a green body, red eyes and a tongue. It looked very ferocious. "If you dare to kill me, you don't have to deliver food to me. You're just an errand boy. Why are you pretending to be someone important?" The long-haired man finally spoke. His voice was hoarse and cold, full of disdain. Hard suddenly stepped forward and used the gun handle to smash the long-haired man's head. The long-haired man looked at Hard without moving. His lips curled into a cold smile. Hard suddenly realized something. He stopped his attack and retreated to the safe zone. He smiled and shook his head. "I won't fall for your trick. That guy you killed 3 years ago, how long did it take you to anger him?" 2 years. The long-haired man said. "You're smarter, but I think it's only temporary. One day I will kill you. If I can escape, I will imprison your wife and children. I will feed them sour olives and hard bread every day. I will let your wife have a taste of my big bird. She will love it." Hard suppressed the anger in his heart. "You're dreaming. You won't be able to escape in this lifetime. This is your end. I advise you to tell me everything you know. As long as you tell me, you will be able to end this pain. You can go to hell sooner." The long-haired man glanced at the bag of food Hard had thrown on the ground. His eyes flashed with hatred. Then, he lifted his foot and stomped on it. The plastic bag of food broke, the hard bread was flattened, and many of the sour olives were crushed. Hard laughed coldly. "Don't do something so pointless. It's not like you haven't done it before. You're wasting food now, but you'll eat it all by nightfall. What I brought you is enough food for a day. A normal person would only be able to eat one meal. You are always in a state of hunger. Not to mention this kind of junk food, even if you were given a dead mouse, you would still eat it. Scram. The long-haired man lay down on the grass again. He couldn't even be bothered to look at Hard again. At this moment, the ironwood door was opened again, and 3 people walked in. Hard only recognized one of them. And it was the one he recognized that made him immediately stand straight and salute. He said respectfully, "Mr. Kearns." He said that the person he knew was called Kearns. He was tall, in his 40s, and looked very capable. He was a senior intelligence officer in Israel's Mossad. His position was second only to the director of the Israeli Intelligence and Special Mission Bureau, Ibora. He was also the leader of the Mossad. The 2 people who followed Kearns in were Yen Fo and Augustman. "Hud, get out," Kearns said in a commanding tone. "Yes." Hard turned and left the cell. After Hard left, Kearns said, "It's this Jawa. He doesn't have a name. We call him Hyena. He's been in Guantanamo Bay for 5 years, and we've been here for 5 years. But neither the Americans nor we can make him talk." "He's the one who found the AE capsule?" Yen Fo asked. Kearns nodded. "That's him. But until now, we still don't know where he found the AE capsule or how he knew about its existence. He killed everyone who knew about the situation. He knew the truth, but he didn't want to say it. I think I have a way to make him talk," Yen Fo said. At this time, the long-haired man lying in the weeds opened his eyes. He glanced at Yen Fo and a disdainful smile appeared on his lip. The Americans in Guantanamo Bay couldn't make him talk. The people in Israel's Mossad also couldn't make him talk. What made this guy in front of him so confident? Yen Fo also looked at the long-haired man, and a cold smile appeared on his lips. "I know that the Americans and the Mossad can't make you talk. But I want to tell you that I'm not them. Have you heard of the FA organization? I specialize in this in the FA organization. From the first person I interrogated until now, no one has disappointed me. I think you're no exception." The long-haired man suddenly stood up and reached out to grab Yen Fo's neck. His nails were very long, like the claws of a wolf made of engineering plastic. Yen Fo didn't move. Augustman punched at him. Bang! Augustman's fist hit the long-haired man's palm like a cannonball. With a muffled sound, the long-haired man's body was lifted off the ground and hit the stone wall hard. His right arm fell to his side. Just now, when Augustman's fist hit his right palm, there was the sound of bones breaking in his right palm and arm. The chief instructor of the FA organization, and the world's top killers like Knight Moshe and Cerrito were his disciples. It was not hard to imagine how strong he was. The long-haired man looked at Augustman in amazement. "Who are you?" Augustman said lightly. "You are a man who is about to die. Does it mean anything to you to ask my name? What you need is relief, not an answer." The long-haired man said, "People of the FA organization, I know of your existence. You want to know the secrets you want to know from my mouth? Dream on. Then let's try," Yen Fo said, his eyes full of confidence. It was a very strange kind of confidence and it looked very abnormal. But this kind of look only lasted for about a second, after which it returned to normal. Kearns said, "This guy has given us a headache. When do you plan to start?" "We are waiting for Mr. Williams' instructions," Yen Fo said. "He will probably find us a U.S. military base and do this within his control." Kearns suddenly frowned. "This is not what we agreed on before. The secrets this guy knows are very important to us. Do you want to keep those secrets to yourself?" "No, no matter what I ask, Mossad will get the same share. I don't need to explain the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, right?" Yen Fo said. Kearns thought for a moment and said, "I have to keep an eye on him myself." Yen Fo said, "No problem. When can we take him away?" I have to report to Mr. Igbala. As for the specific time, you can wait for my notice, Kearns said. Yenfo and Augustman looked at each other and nodded. Chapter 10:22. Half an hour ago, a Native American couple entered from the corner of Holy Cross Road and walked slowly along the sidewalk. The petite Native American girl held the Native American boy's arm affectionately. She didn't mind the intimate contact between the boy's arm and her chest. He went in. Akiko Tsukino said. He probably bought the same food, sour olives and hard bread. Charlotte said, it is indeed the same food. That guy's name is Hard. He is torturing the prisoner in this way. A prisoner that the FA organization is interested in, and at this time, I am very curious about who the prisoner is, but I can't guess, said Akiko Tsukino. Charlotte said, at this time, what do you mean? After the collapse of the pyramid, said Akiko Tsukino. Charlotte smiled. You forgot one thing. What did I forget? Akiko Tsukino looked at Charlotte curiously. I am already dead. Charlotte said, I am dead, but the CIA will not give up. Their target is no longer me, but the source of the AE capsule. They want to find out what happened that year and find clues from it. So the people from the FA organization came. The FA organization is now a dog of the US government. You are right, I forgot this point, said Akiko Tsukino. She ignored this point but gave Charlotte 2 more points. She held Charlotte's arm tighter. Charlotte was a little embarrassed, but he could only accept it. This was the result of his impulsiveness that night. Although it was only 2 centimeters, it was enough for the Japanese woman to confirm some kind of relationship, not to mention that he was now playing a couple with her. The two walked into Holy Cross Street, which was the restaurant opposite Building 48. Charlotte ordered and then ate breakfast with Akiko Tsukino. He ate very slowly, and as he ate, he used his X-ray vision to observe the situation in Building 48. Akiko Tsukino observed the situation in the restaurant from the corner of her eye. A waiter came over with 2 egg tarts. Akiko Tsukino kicked Charlotte under the table. Charlotte smiled, indicating that he understood. Hello, sir, Mississippi, the waiter said politely. Thank you for your support. This is already the 2nd time you've come here for breakfast. This is our gift to you for the egg tarts. I hope you'll like it. Charlotte nodded and said in English, thank you. The waitress placed 2 egg tarts next to Xiaolei and Tsukino Takako's plates respectively. She then asked casually, Sir, Miss, are you from the United States? Xiaolei said, Yes, we are from Pine Ridge, South Dakota. We are the Sioux. I haven't been to that place, but I think it must be beautiful, the waiter said. At this time, Akiko Tsukino suddenly came over and kissed Charlotte on the cheek. Then she said, Honey, eat quickly, or the food will get cold. Okay. Charlotte didn't talk to the waiter anymore, but he tipped the waiter $5. The waiter left with a smile on his face. Charlotte used his X-ray vision on the waiter's body, but he didn't find any weapons or spy equipment. He had to be careful, because this restaurant was opposite the Mossad base. Who could guarantee that there were no agents of the Mossad in this restaurant? Charlotte's eyes moved to Building 48 across the road again. He activated his X-ray vision ability and searched for Yenfo and Augustman of the FA organization. This time, he finally found Yenfo and Augustman in an office on the 3rd floor. When he saw the two, someone had just followed an Israeli man into the office. Charlotte's left eye's vision penetrated the thick curtains and locked on the faces of the 3 people. He was ready to use lip reading to read the conversation between the 3 people. The language used by the 3 people was English. Mr. Kearns. As soon as the office door closed, Yenfo went straight to the point. We received information that a mountain in the suburbs of Jerusalem suddenly collapsed. Is there such a thing? Kearns was stunned for a moment. Who did you hear this from? We are all in the same profession. Why ask such a meaningless question? Yen Fo said. Kearns shook his head. Perhaps there is such a thing, but I haven't received the relevant information yet. I will investigate and verify it later. Mr. Yen, can you tell me why you are so interested in this matter? You know what our purpose is. We represent the interests of the United States, and we are also working for the U.S. government. We are carrying out Mr. Williams's orders to investigate this matter, so please cooperate. Yen Fo said. Are you trying to use the CIA to suppress us? A hint of anger flashed in Kearns' eyes. Mr. Kearns, the usually quiet Augustman said, we definitely don't mean that. You know what the United States wants, and that is what you want. You have investigated for so many years without any results, and the U.S. government is the same. We should unite and cooperate in good faith. That is the only way to solve the problem. Charlotte is dead. Kearns said, you have your hands in our pockets, but you still want us to cooperate in good faith. You guys are really, Yen Fo interrupted Kearns. Mr. Kearns, let me show you something. What? Kearns said. Yen Fo took out a few photos from the inside pocket of his suit and handed them to Kearns. Charlotte's vision was from the bottom to the top. Kearns' hand blocked half of the photo, but even the incomplete half of the photo made him stunned on the spot. In the photo was a corpse. The deceased was a very strong black youth, covered in tattoos and looked very fierce. His brain was cut open, revealing the brain tissue inside. However, it was not a normal person's brain. His brain tissue had shrunk to the size of a fist, and there was no moisture. There were signs of decay, but the other parts of his body did not have any signs of decay. Kearns looked at the remaining photos. Different corpse, same shrunken rotten brain. Without thinking, Charlotte knew who did this. His heart was also filled with excitement. Zhu Xianyue is still alive. She is eating. She is still in the United States. From a human's point of view, he hoped that she was dead, but from a personal and emotional point of view, he hoped that she was alive. In short, every time he faced Zhu Xianyue or anything related to Zhu Xianyue, his heart was filled with contradictions. In the office, Kearns placed the photos on the desk. Why are you showing me these photos of the corpses? Yen Fo said, Mr. Kearns, didn't you notice that the cause of their death is very special? It is indeed very special, but what does it have to do with me? What does it have to do with Israel? Kearns said. Yen Fo said, recently there have been hundreds of these deaths in the United States. At first, the relevant experts thought that it was a rare parasite that ate human brains to survive. But later, they overturned this judgment, because the dead were all criminals, bad people, and drug dealers. The parasite would not only eat the bad people's brains. Someone murdered those people. Using this method to kill people? Kearns said in surprise. What weapon did the killer use? I don't know. Yen Fo said. But the CIA used the celestial system to analyze a clue, and this clue points directly to Charlotte. Isn't that person dead? Kearns was even more surprised. He is indeed dead, but the period of time when these deaths occurred was after he appeared in the United States. He is the only human in this world with a super strong evolution. The celestial system suspects that he created some kind of virus, a brand new virus. Even the United States can't find out what it is. Kearns frowned. In the restaurant opposite Building 48, Charlotte also frowned. He thought to himself, celestial system? I've never heard of it. The fact that it could analyze such a clue and drag me into it already shows its value. Does it know that I placed Xiaoqian in the CIA's intelligence network? His heart was filled with worry. At this time, Yen Fo said, Mr. Kearns, the celestial system also gave a conclusion. I think you will be interested to know. What conclusion? Kearns said. Charlotte's evolution and ability all came from the AE capsule, and the AE capsule came from Israel. Its source is here. Who can guarantee that the brand new virus hasn't been placed in Israel? Don't forget, he has been to Israel and had a firefight with the CIA. If you don't cooperate, you won't be able to share the information provided by the celestial system. When the brand new virus breaks out in Israel, it will be too late for you to cry, UNFO said. It was undeniable that as the military advisor of the FA organization, his mouth was very powerful, more useful than the guns in many people's hands. Augustman said, "Cooperation is the right choice. Take us to that mountain to have a look, and we need to share the information you have gathered over the years." Kearns was silent for a moment. "Wait a moment, I will report to Mr. Igbala." With that, he left the office. UNFO and Augustman looked at each other but didn't say anything. In the office of the senior intelligence officer of the Mossad, if they carefully cleaned it, they would most likely find several bugs and microcameras, right? These two were both old foxes, and they would rather communicate with their eyes than with their mouths. Charlotte rested his eyes for a while. He picked up the free egg tart and ate it while thinking about the next step of the plan. Israel doesn't have the capital to compete with the United States. If the Americans use some new virus to force the Mossad to cooperate, the Americans will definitely get what they want. UNFO and Augustman will go to that mountain. Should I give them some gifts? Akiko Tsukino lowered her voice. "Boss, we have been here for too long. We should go, or else we will be suspected." Charlotte hesitated. "Stay for another 3 minutes. If Kearns didn't return in 3 minutes, he and Akiko Tsukino would leave." Akiko Tsukino nodded. 2 minutes later, Kearns returned to his office. "Our leader has agreed. Come with me, I will take you to the mountain." UNFO smiled. "Thank you." In the dining room, Charlotte got up. "Let's go." Akiko Tsukino took Charlotte's arm. Chapter 10:23. A motorcade set off from 48 Holy Cross Road, heading toward the eastern suburbs of Jerusalem. The motorcade consisted of 4 Desert Hunter armed SUVs and a Mercedes-Benz bulletproof sedan. In the military SUVs sat Israel's most elite special forces, the Sword of David Special Forces, while in the sedan sat Mossad agents. The total number of people in the motorcade was more than 30, and any one of them was an expert who could take on 10 people at once. Just as the motorcade left Holy Cross Road, an ordinary Ford Raptor pickup truck also headed toward the eastern suburbs of Jerusalem from another street. There were 5 people in the 2 Ford Raptor pickup trucks, Charlotte and the 4 members of the Zodiac squad. The driver was Siamu from Iraq, but he looked like a Mexican. "Boss, should we follow them?" Siamu asked. Akiko Tsukino, Yelena, and Angumi Khan all looked at Charlotte, waiting for him to make a decision. It was not a simple decision to go or not, but a decision that concerned life and death. This was because the people who had just left 48 Holy Cross Road were equivalent to 300 professional warriors, and there were only 5 of them on their side. What's more, the Mossad could call for air support in a few minutes. Once the battle started, there would be no turning back. Charlotte was well aware of the situation, so he was very conflicted. He wanted to kill UNFO and Augustman, and this was a great opportunity. But once he opened fire, it would mean an overwhelming pursuit, which was tantamount to mutual destruction. The thoughts of going or not going collided in his mind, and after more than 10 seconds, Charlotte made a decision. "Stop the car." Siamu stepped on the brakes of the Ford Raptor pickup truck. "More than 30 people left the Mossad base," said Charlotte. "I've observed them. There are 28 field agents and 8 special forces from the Mossad. With so many armed men leaving Mossad's base, this is our best chance to attack 48 Holy Cross Road." "Ha ha." Angumi Khan laughed with an exaggerated expression. "Boss, attacking the Mossad's headquarters, whether we succeed or not, will definitely cause a sensation all over the world." The conversation between UNFO and Kearns flashed through Charlotte's mind. He said, No, 48 Holy Cross Road isn't Mossad's headquarters. It's just a very important branch base. Boss, are you sure? Siamu asked. Charlotte said, I'm sure. We had overlooked the obvious fact that this was Jerusalem, the Holy Land to the Arabs. Israel established a state on this land and set Jerusalem as its capital, but their important government institutions weren't here. This was for security reasons. The Mossad's headquarters is equivalent to the CIA's Langley headquarters. It's extremely important, so it can't be here. Siamu slapped his forehead. I didn't think of such a simple problem. Xia Lei continued, therefore, a subbase has sent out 28 field agents, as well as 8 special forces soldiers to help guard this place. There aren't many people in this subbase who can fight anymore. This is a very good opportunity. Yelena said worriedly, Boss, you have to think carefully. This is Jerusalem. Once we open fire, the Israeli Rapid Response Force will arrive here in a few minutes. We won't have a chance to escape. Charlotte smiled. We won't open fire. Then what do we do? Akiko Tsukino couldn't help but be curious. She was also attracted to Charlotte's calmness and wisdom on the battlefield. Charlotte looked at Siamu and said, Siamu, use your intelligence system in the Middle East immediately. I'll give you $20 million. Can you ask those people in the Gaza Strip to create some conflicts in the border area? Then ask them to arrange a safe passage for us to retreat. After we finish the retreat, give them another $20 million. $40 million? Long live Allah! Siamu said excitedly. So much money can make those guys do anything, let alone fight their mortal enemy. Charlotte looked at Yelena and said, Yelena, I want you to find the fiber optic at 48 Holy Cross Road within 20 minutes. Wait for my signal and cut it off. Yelena nodded. Charlotte looked at Angumi Khan. Angumi Khan, you have to find the underground gas pipeline of Holy Cross Road within half an hour. Then choose 3 points that won't hurt ordinary people and put a time bomb. Each time bomb has to be set for half an hour. After you put the bomb, drive around this area and come back here at the 25th minute to pick us up and leave. Angumi Khan nodded. No problem. Charlotte looked at the multifunction watch on his hand. It's 9:09 now. The countdown starts at 9:10. Akiko Tsukino asked, What about me? Charlotte said, Of course you're going with me. We're going to enter 48 Holy Cross Road and rescue the prisoner. A smile appeared on Akiko Tsukino's face. She knew that Charlotte had asked her to follow him to be responsible for the most important part of this operation because of her characteristics. She was happy to be working with him, no matter the reason. A minute later, 4 people got out of the Ford Raptor. Yelena walked quickly, observing the telecommunications fiber optic lines as she walked. Siamu was also walking quickly, making a phone call as he walked. Charlotte brought Akiko Tsukino into 48 Holy Cross Road. He was carrying a backpack, which contained a hacker's computer, weapons, and some other equipment. Akiko Tsukino was also carrying a backpack, which contained more weapons and ammunition. She didn't bring her samurai sword, but the ninja equipment for assassination was with her. Angumi Khan drove the Ford Raptor to another street. As he drove, he looked at the gas pipeline in the residential area. Charlotte walked as he observed the entry point he wanted. His observation had the quality of perspective. A few minutes later, when he was about 100 meters away from 48 Holy Cross Road, he stopped in his tracks and walked towards a 2-story building. It was a very ordinary residential building. The door of the building was locked. Charlotte walked to the door, used a steel wire to open the lock, and then opened the door and walked in. Akiko Tsukino followed. Guard the door. No matter who comes in, knock him out, Charlotte said. Akiko Tsukino nodded and stood by the door. Charlotte took off his backpack, opened it, took out the hacker's computer, and began to work. About 2 minutes later, he entered the Jerusalem City Sanitation Department's system. After another minute, a blueprint appeared on the monitor of the hacker's computer. It was the pipeline diagram of the underground drainage system of 48, Holy Cross Road and several surrounding streets. Looking at the 2D pipeline diagram on the monitor, Charlotte's mind was the 3D model of the real world. Where the pipeline led, how many manhole covers were on the ground, the size of the sewer, and so on, were all under his control. Finally, his eyes locked on a shaded area on the 2D pipeline diagram. The shaded area was facing the ancient building of 48, Holy Cross Road. The corner of his mouth also showed a hint of a smile. 48, Holy Cross Road is holding very important prisoners, and they are imprisoned for several years or even 10 years. Would a place like 48, Holy Cross Road not have a dungeon? If there is a dungeon, then there must be a drainage system. Otherwise, wouldn't the excrement of the prisoners be picked out by the Mossad agents? After looking at the blueprint again, Charlotte closed the hacker's computer, put it into the equipment bag and said, "Akiko, let's go change clothes." Change clothes? Akiko Tsukino looked at Charlotte curiously. She clearly didn't understand Charlotte's motive. Charlotte didn't explain. He quickly walked into a room and opened a closet. In the closet there were sanitation workers' uniforms, one new and one old. He threw the new sanitation worker's uniform to Akiko Tsukino, took the old sanitation worker's uniform, and said to Akiko Tsukino, "Put it on." Akiko Tsukino more or less understood Charlotte's motive. She took off her backpack and took off her jeans and jacket. She wore a set of white combed cotton underwear. It was thin and close to her body, and it felt very transparent. As a result, there were some color changes in the white magnolia scene. There was a mysterious black, and there was a mysterious pink. It was hazy and extremely tempting. Charlotte only took a glance and then looked away. He had to be 120% focused on the action in front of him. He couldn't afford to be distracted. Akiko Tsukino didn't do anything to tempt Charlotte. She quickly put on the sanitation worker's uniform that Charlotte gave her. Just as she put on the clothes, Charlotte, who had already put on the sanitation worker's uniform, found 2 sets of portable oxygen supply devices from a toolbox. He gave one of them to Akiko Tsukino. Akiko Tsukino was very curious why Charlotte knew this place like the back of his hand, even though it was his first time here. Not only did he know the owner's occupation, where the clothes were kept, but he even knew that there was a manhole cover in the backyard. However, she didn't ask. She had begun to get used to Charlotte's sense of mystery. After putting on the portable oxygen supply device, Charlotte carried the equipment bag and left the room. Akiko Tsukino followed him. She thought that Charlotte was going to take her away from the small building. She didn't expect that Charlotte would take her to the backyard behind the small building. There were many flowers and plants planted in the backyard, and there was a cast iron manhole cover on the ground. Charlotte used a tool to pry open the manhole cover and then went down the iron ladder. Akiko Tsukino also entered the sewer. She was the last to enter and grabbed the manhole cover to return it to its original position. It was dark in the sewer, and the dirty sofa had a strong stench. The portable oxygen supply device that Charlotte found played a key role. Without these 2 portable oxygen supply devices, people would not be able to breathe in such an environment. Charlotte turned on the tactical flashlight and waded through the water. The small building was only 100 meters away from 48, Holy Cross Road, but he knew that he had to walk at least 300 meters. Hurry up. After adapting to the environment, Charlotte crouched and ran. Akiko Tsukino also ran. Her full bosom swayed in the darkness, and the spectacular and beautiful scenery was a waste. Chapter 10:24. After 300 meters, Charlotte stopped in a place. He reached out and knocked on the cement wall of the sewage pipe. He used a lot of strength, but there was no sound of air behind the cement wall. Under normal circumstances, judging by the sound, the cement wall was solid, but he said, "It's here. Akiko, blow it up." Akiko Tsukino was puzzled. "I heard you knocking on the wall. It's not empty behind. Are you sure you want me to blow up this place?" Charlotte said, "Trust me, blow it up." Akiko Tsukino stopped asking and took out the explosive device from her backpack. It was a special directional explosive device. The power of the explosion was not very strong, and it was almost silent. Charlotte patted a place on the cement wall with his hand. "It's here." Akiko Tsukino stuck the explosive device to the place where Charlotte had patted, and then she and Charlotte stepped back about 10 steps to avoid the explosion. She pressed the remote control in her hand. Boom! With a muffled sound, the cement wall trembled and then collapsed backward. Before the smoke cleared, Charlotte came to the gap that had been blown up. Behind the gap was an even older sewer. It was high, wide, and very dry. This was the drainage system of Jerusalem in ancient times. Last time, Charlotte used this drainage system to find the ancient tomb under the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. 48 Holy Cross Street was a building built during the Crusades, and a dungeon was built there, so there must be an ancient sewer under it. The area that the sanitation department in Jerusalem had marked with a shadow on the drainage system blueprint was obviously part of the ancient water system in Jerusalem. Mossad did not want people to know this secret, so there was a shadow on the blueprint. There really is a drainage ditch. Boss, you're amazing! Akiko Tsukino looked at Charlotte with her eyes shining. Charlotte stepped over the gap in the cement pipe. "Let's go. We don't have much time left." Akiko Tsukino followed Charlotte and jumped into the ancient drain. Charlotte walked forward for about 20 meters. The originally flat ancient drain suddenly sank down, and the drop reached 2 meters. He jumped down without hesitation. Akiko Tsukino jumped down as well. Xia Lei walked forward for another 10 meters and saw the exit of a well in front of him. When his line of sight shifted to the drain of the well, a stream of dirty water rushed down from above. His lips curled into a smile. "That's it. We found it." Akiko Tsukino asked, "Does this well lead to number 48 Holy Cross Road?" Charlotte nodded and said, "It's the dungeon of Holy Cross 48. This sewer is the drainage pipe of the dungeon. We'll go up from here, find the prisoner, and take him away from here." Akiko Tsukino said, "If this is a dungeon, it must have more than one prisoner. We haven't even seen the prisoner. How do we know who to take away?" This seemed to be a simple problem, but it was also what worried Charlotte the most. He had actually thought about this problem, but he couldn't find a solution at all. The only thing he could rely on was his left eye and his brain. The combination of these two had a strong analytical ability. Of course, there was also an element of gambling in this. He was betting on his luck. His left eye, his brain, and his luck seemed to be very unreliable in the eyes of ordinary people. But for him, his confidence index could reach 80%. In fact, let alone 80%, even if it was only a 50% chance, he would still give it a try. "Be careful. Follow me." Charlotte grabbed the iron ladder and climbed up. The dirty water that flowed down from above splashed on his body. Although he was wearing a breathing mask, he could still smell the disgusting stench. Akiko Tsukino followed behind Charlotte and climbed up. The stench made her frown. After climbing up about 3 meters, a cast iron manhole cover blocked the way out. Charlotte awakened the X-ray ability of his left eye and used it to see through the edge of the manhole cover. He quickly saw clearly that there was a public bathroom and toilet above. It was a place for prisoners to bathe and relieve themselves. There was no one in the bathroom. It was empty and quiet. Charlotte lowered his head and used his back to push the manhole cover up. The manhole cover had not been opened for a long time. The rust made it very stubborn. Charlotte hit it twice, but he couldn't push it up. "Oh no, it's rusty." Charlotte's mood suddenly became bad. He had calculated everything, except for the fact that the manhole cover was rusty. This was an oversight. Even the smartest person couldn't calculate everything. There would always be something missing. "Let me blow it up," Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte said, "No. If it is detonated here, the sound of the explosion will be heard by the people of Mossad." "Then what should we do?" Akiko Tsukino looked at the multifunction watch on her hand and said anxiously, "We only have 18 minutes left. If we delay any more, we won't be able to make it in time for the agreed retreat." "Humph." Charlotte hit it again. This time, he used all his strength. The sound coming from his nostrils was like the sound of a cow plowing the fields. But the manhole cover still didn't move. The manhole cover was not welded or equipped with a guardrail because the Mossad knew its structure very well. The ancient drainage system was a secret in Israel. Very few people knew about it. The drainage system used at 48 Holy Cross Road was this ancient drainage system. Since it was used, the manhole cover had not been opened more than 5 times. Every time it was opened, it would take a lot of effort. So, who would care about it that no one knew about it and it was extremely difficult to open? Another minute passed. There were still 17 minutes before the agreed retreat time. Charlotte was burning with anxiety. If this operation failed because of a rusty manhole cover, it would really be a joke. But at this moment, Akiko Tsukino suddenly climbed up and pulled open Charlotte's zipper. Then, her hand grabbed a place that shouldn't be grabbed. "Akiko, what are you doing?" Charlotte was stunned. Akiko Tsukino didn't say anything. She took off her breathing mask and suddenly moved her head forward. "Don't." Charlotte felt as if he had been bitten by a venomous snake. His body suddenly slammed upwards, trying to avoid Akiko Tsukino's attack. The sudden burst of strength was so shocking that the rusty manhole cover moved. Akiko Tsukino still didn't say anything, but her small mouth was very persuasive. In a very short period of time, she used her silver tongue to persuade a sleeping lion. Charlotte slammed into it again. Crack! The manhole cover was completely loosened. A ray of light shone down from the edge of the manhole cover and shone on Akiko Tsukino's face. A naughty smile appeared on her face. The scene was like a bad girl eating a popsicle and looking at the boy she was teasing with provocative eyes. "I'll deal with you when we get back," Charlotte said fiercely. Akiko Tsukino returned the place that she had attacked to its original position. She said softly, "No problem. You can deal with it however you want." Charlotte was speechless. Charlotte sighed in his heart. He didn't know when he would be able to clear up the mess between him and Akiko Tsukino. However, the Japanese ninja's boldness and openness in certain aspects had given him a lot of insight. The manhole cover was moved to the side. Charlotte climbed out of the manhole. His eyes quickly scanned through all the surroundings that he could see. There was no one in the public bathroom. There was no one in the toilet. He walked toward the door. His left eye's vision had already penetrated the door and entered a new area. Outside the public bathroom was a corridor. On both sides of the corridor were prison cells. Both the corridor and the prison cells looked very old. Everywhere exuded a strong sense of history. Akiko Tsukino came behind Charlotte. In her hands was a Viper pistol with a silencer and a shuriken dipped in poison. Charlotte turned around to look at her. He froze for a moment. Then he reached out and plucked a black mustache from Akiko Tsukino's cherry lip. He held it in his hand, not daring to let her see it. Akiko Tsukino's face inexplicably turned red. Charlotte's act of burying one's head in the sand had clearly failed. This was a small interlude in the operation. It didn't affect the two of them. Charlotte pushed open the bathroom door and entered the corridor. Akiko Tsukino followed closely. The prison cells on both sides of the corridor were empty. There were no prisoners. This wasn't surprising. This place wasn't a professional prison. Mossad would only detain prisoners with special identities. There couldn't be many such prisoners. In fact, the fact that Haid went to the restaurant across the street to buy breakfast every morning was enough to explain the situation. If it was a professional prison with many prisoners, then there would definitely be a kitchen and a chef. Haid wouldn't have to go out to buy breakfast. If I'm lucky, there's only one prisoner in this ancient prison, and that person is the one I'm looking for. There's no need for me to eliminate him. It seems like my luck isn't too bad. The empty prison made Charlotte happy. He didn't have to eliminate and analyze other prisoners. His footsteps were much faster. After turning a corner, the corridor continued forward. At the end of the corridor was a stone staircase. The staircase led upward. It was obviously the passage to the inside of Mossad's base. Charlotte's gaze moved to a wooden iron door at the corner. The door was tightly shut. There were 2 copper basins on the stone walls on both sides of the door. They looked very old and were not in use. There was an LED ceiling lamp above the door. It was lit and emitted a cold light. Charlotte had a feeling in his heart. He moved forward and his left eye looked through the iron door. A prisoner lying in a pile of grass entered his sight. The prisoner looked terrible. His hair was messy and greasy. He hadn't showered in months. His clothes were torn and tattered. The grease on the cloth was black and shiny from friction. He was curled up in the grass. His face couldn't be seen. Charlotte's gaze suddenly moved to the right arm that peeked out from the tattered sleeve. He couldn't look away anymore. There was a king cobra tattoo on the prisoner's right arm. It had a green body, red eyes and a tongue. It looked very scary. An image suddenly appeared in Charlotte's mind. In the pyramid inside the mountain on the outskirts of Jerusalem, a tall man killed the Israeli archaeologist with one shot and then took away the amber that contained the AE capsule from time. It was him. Chapter 10:25. Just as he was about to reach the door, Charlotte suddenly stopped. He raised his head to look at the surveillance camera on the wall of the corridor. The camera was facing the iron door of the cell. He only needed to take 2 more steps to enter the range of the surveillance camera. Just as he stopped, Akiko Tsukino reached out to grab his arm. She had also noticed the surveillance camera on the wall of the corridor. She pulled his hand to stop him from going over. However, her warning did not come as quickly as his alertness. Charlotte looked at the multifunction watch on his wrist. There were 30 seconds left before Yelena cut off the optical fiber. He was secretly glad that he did not make a low-level mistake. When people are excited, it is easy for them to overlook some basic things. Sometimes, a small mistake can lead to irreparable consequences. The 30 seconds passed in the blink of an eye. Charlotte's gaze was locked onto the surveillance camera. He saw a red warning light on the surveillance camera. Yelena had cut off the optical fiber to 48 Holy Cross Road. The timing was just right. Charlotte quickly walked to the iron door. 15 seconds later, he used a tool to pick the lock to open the door. The iron door opened and Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino walked in. After entering, Akiko Tsukino closed the door. She had to do this because the direction of the iron door was facing the stone staircase that led to the Mossad base. If someone came down from above, they would be able to see the door open. There was a pungent smell of urine and feces in the cell, and the air was turbid. Akiko Tsukino's brows furrowed again. Like most women, she did not like dirty and messy environments. "Hey!" Charlotte said in English. "Wake up." The man with the king cobra tattoo did not move. It appeared that he had fallen asleep or fainted. Charlotte walked to his side and used his foot to nudge him. In that instant, the man with the Eye King snake tattoo on his arm suddenly flipped over from the haystack. His right leg ferociously kicked at the vital spot between Charlotte's legs. A second ago, he was like a dead dog, but in less than a second, he had transformed from a dead dog into a ferocious tiger that could take a person's life with a single bite. Caught off guard, Charlotte hurriedly raised his right leg and used his hardest knee to block his attack. Bang! Under the impact, Charlotte's body shook and he took half a step back. After all, he was supporting his body with one leg, and it was difficult for him to maintain his balance under the violent impact. The man with the king cobra tattoo was in such a terrible condition, but he was still so powerful and fast. If he was healthy, one could imagine how terrifying his strength would be. The ambush failed, and the man with the king cobra tattoo jumped out from the bushes. But before he could attack, Akiko Tsukino pointed the viper pistol in her hand at his head. "Move again and I'll kill you." Akiko Tsukino's voice was very cold. The man with the king cobra tattoo did not attack Charlotte or Akiko Tsukino again. He did not know the identity of the two Native Americans in front of him and why they had come. If he continued to attack, the Native American woman might really shoot him. "You are not from the Mossad. Who are you? The CIA?" The man with the king cobra tattoo said. He was also speaking in English. With two Native Americans in front of him, it was not surprising for him to have such a guess. Charlotte said, "Do you want to live? Come with us. Answer my question." Sometimes the man with the eye tattoo was not tempted at all. It was not that he did not want freedom. To him, if these two Native Americans were from the CIA, then he would have jumped from a wolf's den to a tiger's den. "Bastard!" Akiko Tsukino said angrily. "I took such a big risk to save you. What are you thinking?" The man with the king cobra tattoo glanced at Akiko Tsukino, then stared straight at Charlotte. He seemed to be making one last guess. Now is not the time to prove our identity and purpose. Charlotte looked at the multifunction watch on his wrist. "We have 11 minutes left. In 11 minutes, we must retreat out of Holy Cross Street. I'll give you 30 seconds to think about it. Either you come with me or you stay here. But you should know that you will soon be taken away by the FA organization." 20 seconds left, Akiko Tsukino said. She was helping Charlotte time. "Humph." The man with the king cobra tattoo sneered. "You want to trick me? Haven't you played such a trick before? Have I ever been fooled?" Akiko Tsukino was about to scold him, but Charlotte stopped Akiko Tsukino. A man who had been imprisoned in prison and dungeon for too long, suffering from torture and all kinds of scams, would not easily trust anyone. "Boss, 30 seconds have passed." Akiko Tsukino looked at the multifunction watch on his wrist and reminded Charlotte. The person he was looking for was right in front of him, and Charlotte was certainly not willing to give up. He thought for a moment, suddenly reached out and rubbed his cheek twice, then took off a corner of the human skin mask, revealing a bit of his original skin. Before Charlotte spoke, the man with the king cobra tattoo said in surprise, "This? How did you get this kind of mask?" He did not speak in English, but in Chinese. Charlotte's heart moved. "Are you Chinese?" He also spoke in Chinese. The man with the king cobra tattoo did not answer Charlotte's question. He seemed very anxious. "Tell me, where did you get this kind of human skin mask?" Charlotte said, "I made it myself." The man with the king cobra tattoo suddenly became excited. "Who taught you?" "We'll talk about it after we get out. We don't have time," Charlotte said. "Okay, I'll go with you. Help me open these chains." The man with the king cobra tattoo finally made a decision. Charlotte used a tool to open the shackles on his feet and hands. It took him a total of 20 seconds to open the 4 locks, which was almost the same time as opening the key. With the ability of X-ray vision, he could clearly see the internal structure of the lock, so the process of opening the lock was naturally very easy. After opening the lock, Akiko Tsukino vigilantly looked at the man with the king cobra tattoo. As long as he made any move, she would not hesitate to make a move. But her worry was unnecessary. The man with the king cobra tattoo did not make any movement. He just moved his hands and feet, and then followed Charlotte to the door. Just as they walked to the door, Charlotte suddenly stopped. He raised his right hand and put up 2 fingers. Akiko Tsukino then flashed to the side of the iron and wood door, The viper pistol in her hand was also raised to a position parallel to her collarbone. Charlotte's hand gesture was a tactical gesture for two people outside, and her movement was a posture of preparing to shoot the man in the head. Charlotte was also ready to fight. He stood on the other side of Akiko Tsukino, and in his hand was a viper pistol with a silencer. The man with the king cobra tattoo did not wait for Charlotte to say anything. He returned to the grass, curled up, and pressed the chains that Charlotte had already opened under his body. He became a dead dog again. The three of them were all ready. The sound of footsteps and voices came from outside the door. The field agents have already gone to investigate. There's a problem with the optical fiber. Something like this has never happened before. A man's voice, speaking in Hebrew. This voice was not unfamiliar to Charlotte. He could already tell that it was Hard's voice. Another man's voice came. "Leader, do you suspect this is a premeditated attack?" Hard's voice said, "We have to be careful. The people of the FA organization are very cunning. Who can guarantee that they won't use other means to take that guy away?" "Leader, I'll guard the door." Hard's subordinate walked to the iron and wood door and opened it with a key. The iron and wood door opened, and he pushed the door open, stepping in. The man with the king cobra tattoo lying on the ground entered his sight, just as he said he would. That guy was like a dead dog. This guy is like a pig. Hard's subordinate walked into the cell. Puff! Before Hard's subordinate noticed anything, a bullet went into his brain from the side. Blood and brain matter splattered out, splattering on Hard's face. Hard's reaction was extremely fast. His legs kicked the ground, and his body jerked backward. His body was still moving in the air, but his hand had already finished the action of pulling out the gun. He opened his mouth, about to warn the people on the ground. But the moment he opened his mouth, a figure flew out from the other side. Before he could see the person's face clearly, a bullet had already entered his mouth, and then opened a hole in the back of his head. In the end, he still couldn't make a sound, nor could he fire a shot. Hard's body fell to the ground. Only then did Charlotte's body land, and he stood up again with a light push of his hands. "Take the body, let's get out of here." Akiko Tsukino nodded, and then picked up the body of the Mossad agent that she had killed. Charlotte also picked up Hard's body. When he left, he even used his foot to wipe the blood on the ground a few times. If he had more time, he would have cleaned it up without leaving a trace, but he didn't have the time. The man with the king cobra tattoo also used his foot to wipe the blood on the cell, and then followed Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino to the direction of the public bathroom. Just as the three of them turned the corner, the monitor in the corridor lit up with a green working light, and started working normally. Mossad had already recovered the optical fiber fault. It was so fast that no one dared to believe it. After entering the public bathroom, Charlotte opened the manhole cover and threw Hard's body down. Akiko Tsukino also threw the body that she had brought out into the sewer. The three of them entered the sewer, and Charlotte was the last to enter the well, and he put the manhole cover back in place. There were traces in the cell, in the corridor, and even the manhole cover that had been pried open was a very obvious sign, but Charlotte didn't care anymore. The three of them entered the sewer, and the man with the king cobra tattoo kicked Hard's head a few times, venting his anger and resentment. "Damn it! You're lucky. I'll find your family, and I'll make them come and accompany you." His words, as well as his ferocious expression, sent a chill down Charlotte's spine. "We should go," Akiko Tsukino said coldly. The man with the king cobra tattoo kicked Hard's head again, and then left with Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino. In the stinking sewage, Hard's head was already unrecognizable. The three of them were very fast, and in less than 2 minutes, they had passed through the 300-meter-long ancient sewer and arrived at the hole that had been blown up. Charlotte tossed the portable oxygen supply device to the man with the king cobra tattoo. "Put it on, there's no oxygen in the sewer." "What about you?" The man with the king cobra tattoo looked at Charlotte with a strange expression. Charlotte said, I can go 5 minutes without breathing." With that, he stepped over the hole and entered the sewer. Akiko Tsukino followed. The man with the king cobra tattoo said something that was almost inaudible. What's his relationship with him? Chapter 10:26. The manhole cover in the backyard of the building on Holy Cross Road moved a little, and then lifted off the ground. Charlotte climbed out from under the manhole cover, followed by Akiko Tsukino and the man with the king cobra tattoo. Charlotte kicked the manhole cover back to its original position, and then walked to the door of the backyard. There were still 2 minutes before the agreed time to retreat. The three of them had just walked out of the building and were walking towards the intersection of Holy Cross Road when an ear-piercing alarm suddenly sounded from 48 Holy Cross Road behind them. Charlotte looked back and saw the 2 Special Forces soldiers guarding the door running into the base. It was obvious that someone had gone to the dungeon and found that the prisoner had escaped. There was still blood on the ground, so the alarm was sounded. However, Kearns had taken most of the field agents with him, so there were fewer people in the base who could participate in the pursuit. Even the Special Forces soldiers guarding the door had been mobilized. However, this situation would only last for a few minutes. 5 minutes later, the Rapid Reaction Force stationed in Jerusalem would arrive. At that time, it would definitely not be a small-scale arrest operation. It would be a city-wide operation. Quick! Quick! Charlotte urged. Akiko Tsukino and the man with the king cobra tattoo quickly followed. The man with the king cobra tattoo was wearing the clothes that Charlotte had taken off earlier. Otherwise, he would have become an eye-catching target. Just as the three of them reached the intersection, a Ford Raptor pickup truck stopped in front of them. The door opened and the three of them got in. Angumi Khan, who was driving, started the car and unhurriedly entered the road. Then, he sped up and drove forward. There were 6 people in the Ford Raptor pickup truck, so the space was a little cramped. Akiko Tsukino gave up her seat to Charlotte. She squatted in the gap between the sofa. Her plump butt rested on Charlotte's knee. She wanted to continue, but it was inconvenient for her to do so with the others in the car. Charlotte said, "It's hard for you to squat like this. It'll be troublesome if the traffic police find you. Why don't you sit on my lap?" Since Charlotte had spoken, how could Akiko Tsukino be polite? She sat on Charlotte's lap. The soft white ball was pressed against his thighs, and her slim and sexy little waist was pressed against Charlotte's lower abdomen. His sensitive parts were also invaded, and for a moment, all his senses were in a mess. At this critical moment, Akiko Tsukino's big white blob showed signs of restlessness. It kept squeezing backwards, squeezing, then releasing and squeezing again. However, it was not that he was deliberately provoking him at this time. Instead, the Ford Raptor pickup truck that Angumi Khan was driving drove into an old alley. The road surface of this alley was not asphalt or cement, but old stone bricks, and it was very bumpy. Under such circumstances, before the car had even passed through the alley, his things stood up, and he was furious for the beauty. Akiko Tsukino obviously knew the subtle changes in Charlotte's body, and the corners of her mouth secretly showed a trace of a smile. However, she quickly hid her smirk. She was the only one who knew this secret. She wouldn't tell anyone, and she didn't want anyone to find out about it. The Ford Raptor passed through the alley, and the road was finally flat. In front of them was a road around the city. It had 8 lanes, and cars were coming and going on the road. As soon as Angumi Khan drove the car into the road around the city, a long line of military off-road vehicles and armored vehicles roared from the opposite side. Several helicopters in the sky flew in the direction of Holy Cross Road. The helicopters did not fly at a high altitude, and the Israeli soldiers on the planes could be clearly seen. The Rapid Response Force stationed in Jerusalem was finally dispatched, and it was almost the same as the 5 minutes that Charlotte had expected. "Siamu, have you arranged the retreat route?" Charlotte asked aloud, and his voice broke the silent atmosphere in the car. Siamu said, "Boss, everything has been arranged. The Rapid Response Force stationed in Jerusalem will need 10 minutes to seal off Jerusalem. By then, we will have left the city. The people from Gaza will meet us outside the city." "Do they know who we are?" Charlotte asked. Siamu said, "Don't worry, boss. They only recognize money, not people. Didn't you say that the enemy of my enemy is my friend? In their eyes, we are their friends." "That's good," Charlotte said. He saw Siamu looking at Akiko Tsukino out of the corner of his eye, and there was sadness and loss in his eyes. He sighed in his heart, thinking that he would have a good talk with Siamu after this matter was over. Siamu liked Akiko Tsukino, and Akiko Tsukino didn't like Siamu, but liked him. He was already the husband of 4 wives and the father of 4 children. Their relationship was more than a simple triangle relationship. It was simply a heptagram relationship. It had long been messy. The root of the problem was that there was only a muddled wish account between him and Akiko Tsukino. He had no love for Akiko Tsukino at all. If he had to talk about feelings, the relationship between them was at most that of a family. A few minutes later, Angumi Khan drove the car out of the ring road, out of the interchange, and then drove in the direction of the suburbs. The Ford Raptor pickup truck had just left the ring road, and a minute later, the Jerusalem police blocked the road and set up checkpoints. Charlotte's plan was perfect. If they were delayed for even a minute, they would fall into a situation from which they could never recover. After entering the suburbs, everyone's mood suddenly relaxed. Siamu made a phone call and then said, "They are already waiting for us in the village ahead. We will get there in 10 minutes. Charlotte nodded and said, "Later, everyone be alert. If they have any bad intentions, you know what to do." Angumi Khan said with a smile, "Then kill them. Save your money." Siamu didn't say anything. He obviously didn't want that to happen, because he was the one who found them. If those people had bad intentions, he didn't know how to explain it to Charlotte. Charlotte didn't know what Siamu was thinking. He said, "Don't think too much, Siamu. Even if something happens, it has nothing to do with you. Well, let's find a time to have a good talk." Siamu smiled at Charlotte. He seemed to know what Charlotte wanted to talk to him about. A few minutes later, the car entered a small country road, and the road was bumpy again. Charlotte's worries appeared again. He had now become Akiko Tsukino's human sofa. The more uneven the road, the more Akiko Tsukino's big white ball would squeeze and harass him. And his part had not lowered its head since Akiko Tsukino sat on him. Sometimes, the man with the king cobra tattoo didn't speak from the beginning. He observed everyone in the car and seemed to be thinking about something. Charlotte had a lot of questions to ask him, but now was not the time to ask questions, so he didn't talk to the man with the king cobra tattoo. A few minutes later, the car entered a village. It was an Arab village. In Israel, not all people were Jews. There were also a small number of Arabs. They lived in the cracks. Under Siamu's guidance, Angumi Khan drove the Ford Raptor pickup truck into a farmyard. Before the car stopped, 4 Arab men came out of the house. They were holding AK-47s in their hands and had thick beard. At first glance, it was obvious that they were the kind of people who were not afraid of death. Akiko Tsukino pulled out her gun. Charlotte grabbed her hand. "Don't be impulsive. Let's observe first." Akiko Tsukino nodded and put away her Viper pistol. Siamu got out of the car and went to negotiate with the 4 armed men. At this time, the man with the king cobra tattoo said, "These guys are militants from the Gaza Strip. They are not moderate. Be careful of them." Charlotte said, "You've been in the dungeon for so long. Do you still recognize these people?" The man with the king cobra tattoo said, "Of course I don't know them. But their weapons have their insignia. I recognize their insignia." Siale shifted his gaze to take a look. Sure enough, he saw a pattern of stars and the moon on the AK-47 of the Arab armed man. In his heart, He had a new understanding of the man with the Eye King snake tattoo. Although this guy had been locked up in the dungeon for a long time, he had never given up, and his strength had not weakened by much. What was certain was that as long as he was given a gun, he could become a cold-blooded killer in the blink of an eye. Siamu quickly finished negotiating with the 4 Arab men. He turned and said, "Get out of the car. It's done." The people in the car opened the door and got out. One of the Arab men waved his hand and said in Arabic, "Follow me. Don't talk or ask questions. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences." Charlotte and his men followed the 4 Arab armed men into a room. It was a very simple dormitory. The armed man who had spoken just now lifted a piece of Persian-style carpet and revealed a wooden plank. He lifted the plank, and under it was the entrance to a tunnel. Palestine had been completely blockaded by Israel, and the Gaza Strip lacked doctors and medicine. This also made the people of the Gaza Strip practice the ability to dig tunnels. It was not surprising that the people in the Gaza Strip could dig a tunnel into Egypt, but it was unprecedented for them to dig a tunnel into Israel. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, Charlotte would not have believed it. "Put on a mask." An Arab militant threw a few black balaclavas on the ground. His expression was ferocious and his tone was fierce. "Also, take out your weapons." Charlotte frowned and said in Arabic, "What do you mean? We paid you $40 million, and this is what you get in exchange for services like this? I can hire 4,000 people like you." Be ****. The Arab armed man raised the rifle in his hand and smashed it down. Charlotte did not move, but Akiko Tsukino had already cut in front of him. Although she did not have a gun in her hand, she had a shuriken. "Stop!" At this critical moment, the leading Arab armed man reached out and grabbed his men's guns. "They are not our enemies." People in the Middle East hated Americans, and the Indians were unjustly implicated. Anyone who knew American history knew that Americans killed the Indians more ruthlessly than anyone else. They almost caused the Indians to go extinct. The leading Arab armed man said, "Sir, I'm sorry. This is our strategic tunnel. We have our rules. Please cooperate. It's fine if you don't hand over your weapons, but please put on a mask." Siamu looked at Charlotte. He could not make such a decision. In fact, he was already a little ashamed. Charlotte had given him $40 million to do this for him, but Charlotte obviously did not get the kind of service he wanted. Charlotte said, "No problem, we can put on a mask." Charlotte took the lead to put on a mask, and then pretended to feel his way into the tunnel. After him, Akiko Tsukino and Siamu also put on a mask and went into the tunnel one by one. Chapter 10:27. The tunnel was very narrow, but it was barely passable. 2 Arab militants walked in front to lead the way, and the leader and the other walked behind. Xiaolei and his men walked in the middle. He was not affected by the black headgear, but the others were affected, and their walking speed was not fast. From time to time, Xiaolei would turn around to look at the 2 armed Arabs behind him, observing their movements. But he was not worried that they would do something here. Because of the $40 million he promised to pay, $20 million would only be paid after he left Jerusalem safely. $20 million was a huge sum of money for an armed group like them. They had to get it no matter what. After walking for about 100 meters, the tunnel widened a lot. Charlotte saw a simple railway track and iron boxes installed on the track to transport goods. Obviously, this tunnel was a tunnel for armed groups in the Gaza Strip to transport people and equipment to Jerusalem. It was also a channel for armed groups in the Gaza Strip to transport important goods from Jerusalem to the Gaza Strip. "Go up, you will soon arrive in the Gaza Strip," the leader of the Arab militants said. Charlotte clearly saw the iron box on the track, but he said, "Go up what? Where to?" The 2 Arab militants in front turned around. One of them hit the iron box with the butt of his gun and said rudely, This is a carriage. Climb up. Hurry up. Oh, I know. Charlotte reached out his hand like a blind man. When he touched the big iron box, he carefully climbed up. After him, Akiko Tsukino and Angumi Khan also climbed into the carriage. 4 Arab militants also climbed into the carriage. Then the leader started the electric device, and the iron box moved forward. It was very fast, almost 50 kilometers per hour. In the carriage, an Arab militant put his head close to the leader's ear, and his voice was almost inaudible. But he did not know that there was a pair of eyes looking at his mouth through the black headgear. "Boss, are we going to let them go after we get the rest of the money?" The leader sneered, and his voice was almost inaudible. "They're willing to pay $40 million just for this retreat. They're not ordinary fat sheep. After we get out, we can kidnap them together with our men. I think we can earn a few $100 million from that Native American. Apart from the sugar daddy. Do I still need to teach you that? Get rid of the others, we don't need that many people," the leader said. The Arab militant who asked the question nodded and didn't say anything else. Xia Lei retracted his gaze and suddenly said in Mandarin, "Oh no, I actually forgot my safe in the hotel in Jerusalem. There's $1 million in that safe and $5 million worth of diamonds in it." The members of the Zodiac squad immediately shifted their attention to Charlotte. Of course, they knew what Charlotte was talking about, but no one remembered that he had a lockbox, let alone $1 million and a diamond worth $5 million. "Hey, what are you talking about?" the leader asked warily. Charlotte said in Chinese, "I'm talking about my money, dollars and diamonds. They're worth $6 million. I left them in the hotel in Jerusalem." "Speak in Arabic." The leader's eyes turned cold. Charlotte said in Arabic, "I said I left a lockbox in a hotel in Jerusalem. Contains $1 million and diamonds worth $5 million. Hearing this, the leader's jaw almost dropped to the ground. Charlotte sighed and said, "Forget it. It's only $6 million. It's not even enough to play a card game in Las Vegas." "Can you tell me which hotel room it is in?" the leader said. "I can ask my men to get it for you." "Really?" Charlotte didn't believe him. "Of course, but you have to give us a 50% commission," the leader said. Charlotte smiled. "Of course, it's not bad if I can get $3 million back. My room is on the top floor of the Hilton Hotel, room 408. I put my room card in the hotel's locker. It's a locked box, and the password to open it is 908,912. There's also a limited edition Patek Philippe watch in the box. That's my favorite. Please bring it back to me." The members of the Zodiac squad were stunned. They knew that Charlotte was lying, but they didn't know why Charlotte would tell such a lie. The leader stopped the iron box and said to his men, "You take one person back to the Hilton Hotel and get it back." "Yes." The Arab armed man followed and got out of the car. The armed man in front also jumped out of the iron box one step ahead of his companions. It was obviously a lucrative job, so of course they had to do it. After the 2 armed men got out of the car, the leader turned on the electric device, and the iron box continued to move forward. The tunnel was still long and there was no end to it. One by one, the cheap white light bulbs passed by. Sitting in a big metal box in such a tunnel was like passing through a tunnel of time to go to hell and live in peace and contentment. Akiko Tsukino quietly leaned her head on Charlotte's shoulder, but she didn't say anything. Charlotte seemed to notice something. He reached out and put his arm around her shoulder, and the two of them looked very intimate. This scene fell into the eyes of the leader behind, but he didn't have any reaction. After all, in his eyes, Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino were both Native Americans, and it was very likely that they were a couple. It was normal for them to be a little intimate. The big iron box moved forward for some distance. The leader looked away from Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino. Just when the leader looked away, Akiko Tsukino said in a voice that only Charlotte could hear, "Do these guys want to kill us? Is that why you tricked 2 of us?" Charlotte's voice was also very faint. Yes, they want to kidnap us. The leader also said that he wanted to kill you, and only leave me the gold mine. I know these guys are not reliable. I really don't know how Sayamu does things. Akiko Tsukino said with some dissatisfaction. Charlotte said, don't blame him. Time is limited, and it's not easy for him to do this. Those guys are greedy for money, and people like them are not worthy of trust. Then what should we do? Count to 3, I will kill the one behind, and you kill the one in front. Charlotte said. Okay. Akiko Tsukino responded. 1. When counting, Charlotte's hand slipped to his waist and took out a military knife. Akiko Tsukino also had a shuriken in her hand. 2, 3. When he counted to 3, Charlotte suddenly turned around and fiercely stabbed the leader with the military knife in his hand. However, before Charlotte's military knife stabbed into the leader's body, the man with the king cobra tattoo sitting next to the leader suddenly chopped the leader's neck with his palm. It's not that Charlotte's speed wasn't as fast as him, but he simply made a move first than Charlotte. The leader groaned, and his body fell out of the iron box. But before he fell, the man with the king cobra tattoo suddenly grabbed his head and twisted it in the opposite direction. Gotcha! The leader's cervical vertebra broke like a sugar cane, and his head drooped down. The man with the king cobra tattoo gently pushed, and the leader fell out of the iron box. The AK-47 in his hand also fell into the hands of the man with the king cobra tattoo. At that moment, Charlotte was a little nervous, but he didn't stop the man with the king cobra tattoo. Because he could feel that, although the man with the king cobra tattoo had a gun in his hand, he didn't intend to attack anyone. He just laid the AK-47 flat on his knee, and even let go of his hand without taking it. On the other side, Akiko Tsukino did her job neatly. At the moment when Charlotte counted to 3, Akiko Tsukino stabbed the back of the head of the armed Arab sitting in front of him with the poisonous shuriken in his hand. With such a stab, even if it wasn't poisonous, he would have died, not to mention it was dipped in poison. Sayamu and Yumi-kan and Yelena took off the black cloth on their heads. Their faces didn't have the slightest expression of surprise. Although they didn't see what just happened, they knew what happened. Charlotte stopped the iron box. Sayamu spoke, his face was full of shame. Boss, I'm sorry, I screwed up. These guys, they lied to me. Charlotte patted Sayamu's shoulder. Don't blame yourself, you've tried your best. If it were me, I would have done the same. These guys don't have any humanity at all. When they encountered such an opportunity to make a lot of money, they would abandon all morals. Boss, Although Charlotte said so, Sayamu still felt ashamed. All right, don't mention this again in the future. Charlotte changed the topic. I guess we'll get out of this tunnel soon. Those guys have reinforcements. When we get out later, don't hesitate to kill them immediately. I want that 20 million back. Sayamu said hatefully. Money isn't important. After killing them, we'll leave immediately. Charlotte said. 20 million US? In the eyes of ordinary people, this amount of money was definitely a crazy number, but in the eyes of Charlotte, it was probably only a few $100s. If he wanted money, even if he didn't take it from the Rema Group's account, he could get it from the US stock market. The man with the king cobra tattoo said, Can I use a gun? Charlotte said, Of course you can. The man with the king cobra tattoo nodded and didn't say anything. Charlotte said, Friend, we spent so much to save you, we don't have any malicious intentions, nor do we have any purpose against you. I only have one purpose, which is to find out the truth of some things. So, don't leave alone. This was a very polite warning. The man with the king cobra tattoo nodded again, and still didn't say anything. In fact, he also wanted to find out something from Charlotte, so even if Charlotte didn't mention it, he wouldn't leave alone. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.